All right, we're live and we're back again, and I'm thrilled to welcome Lyle onto the channel. Hey man, how you doing?
Doing great, Jace. Thanks for having me on.
That's all right. Hey, I know we moved this a day earlier at short notice because I had a clash tomorrow that I simply was last minute, but I can't move it. So I appreciate you being flexible, man. I really do.
It is either this or work on that amp behind me. So I'm here most of the time. It's a sad tale.
It is. This is our life. So man, I'm just going to tell a very quick story before I'm going to get into a bunch. I've got some questions for Lyle that
I have some answers. We can see if they match.
Yeah, that's cool. And then obviously in the chat, guys, feel free to jump in with any questions, right? And we'll absolutely make our way through all that stuff. But man, I actually first became aware of you and your channel. This a little while ago, where a friend of mine who's a keen hobby amp builder sent me a link to one of your videos, and it was a video that you did on the Marshall Origin. Do you remember that?
Oh yeah. I have people telling me I'm an idiot about that video at least twice a week.
Yeah, well, I think I've been subjected to probably the same comments because I've made obviously a bunch of videos on the Origin, which is why my mate directed me to yours. There's a group of people out there that just love those amps, which is fine.
People like pink bubblegum ice cream. You can't help everyone.
Yeah, and so I don't know if you remember this, but you in that video you made a comment about some guy in Australia that had modded one of these things. Do you recall that?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I was aware of your mods. I still don't know that they're quite worth doing, because at the end of the day, you have a much better sounding amp, and someone hears that much better sounding amp and they rush out and buy a Marshall Origin 20 or 50 and it sounds bad. And so Marshall gets a sale, someone gets their expectations dashed, and you don't get the full credit for what you did. So I should look at the camera, but I'm looking at you on my screen, and so it's hard to have a conversation like this. We should wear sunglasses. It makes much more sense. I'll be right back.
It would. No, look, that whole Origin thing was very early days of my channel, and I was kind of figuring, it was one of those things where I was trying to figure out what kind of stuff could I do that might actually get some traction.
Right. And it makes total sense. I got really well known 15 years ago for Class 5 mods, and I stopped doing them for the same reasons. I don't quite understand all the benefits to you of being known for doing Origin mods. You do all this work, and then Marshall gets more sales of the same damn thing you were trying to fix.
Yes, it's true. Is it? And it's a pain in the ass of an amp to mod too. It's
because they didn't design it well. And the thing that kills me is for the same price. And it's a 1987, a 1959, a super lead, a super bass. It's a very simple circuit. Like 7 components changed to make the various things. They could have made a really good sounding Marshall with an effects loop. They did not. And then later they came out with this Studio Vintage 20, and they called it that, but it cost, at least in the United States, another $1,000 over the Origin, and it's built the same bad way.
It is built the exact same way.
I mean, if you or I had the logo, we would have the sales that go with the logo, but I think we'd give a rat's ass, and maybe something would be behind the logo these days, but no one's asking us.
It's so true. And I actually heard, well, someone said on my stream 2 weeks ago, maybe it was 2 or 3 weeks ago, that Marshall have announced that they're discontinuing the Origin head. So there you go. So maybe they are listening. Who knows?
Either that, or they got something newer and better and worse. The thing that kills me is I don't remember what the list of Dave's 20-watt series are. I think they're like $1,500 to $1,800. It's the same price point as the SVT 20.
Yeah.
everything Dave Friedman, if you guys don't know who we're talking about, everything at that price point is infinitely better. Used the exact same price point, and if Dave were making them in the numbers that Marshall were making them, those would be $800 amps. So the demand is there. The difference being who's designing it.
Totally. I mean, there's an. I mean, look. I love Marshalls, right? Don't get me wrong, but you know, it comes.
Love old ones, 1983 and earlier.
Yes,
and after 83. The vertical inputs can be, I mean, the horizontal inputs can be tweaked, as you showed last week. But, you know, starting with the 900s, problems crept in.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was actually one of my questions, right? Which was, what was the last great Marshall that was made, do you think?
The last vertical input 2203 or 2204 that left the factory. In fairness, I've not tried their anniversary limited hand-wired super. Well, actually, no, I did have one. Damn. Okay, I was trying to give them faint praise, but no, I did have one of the hand-wired anniversary super leads reissues, and brand new amp, and the power transformer died because it was the same cheap power transformer they've been using on the reissues for a long time. So I don't remember. I put a Mercury or a Haybor in it, whatever, and it was great again. And I undid a stupid heater thing that they did. But other than that, that was the last really good Marshall that I've experienced.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. Look, the reissue stuff is mostly okay. I mean, certainly, I think the 2203X they've done.
Oh yeah, I mean the 2203 and 2204 reissues, and the 1980. Sorry, the
1987X.
Yeah, that's 50 watt, but the and the 59 reissues and the older Silver Jubilee reissues were all fine. You do make a few little changes, mostly just that stupid heater trim pot issue. You know, they're good. They're good amps. They're not anywhere as good as they used to be, but they're good. But it's just that what kills me is that they used to be great. If you bought a Marshall 1987, if you bought a Fender Super Reverb, it used to be great. Now the modern reissues, they're pretty good. They can be made better. And that's sad to me because those two companies should be the standard bearers.
I agree. Can I just go back? I'm going to go back a little bit here and ask you, how did you get into this caper in the first place, Lyle? Like, how did you get into?
Well, I've told this joke before, but maybe some of your viewers haven't heard it.
Yeah, well, I haven't heard it.
I was an English major, and I was a musician. And that meant that I was qualified to say, wouldst thou like fries with that? And so when my amp broke, I could not afford to have anyone fix it. It started off with, hey, my cable broke. I couldn't afford to have someone do that. My DOD chorus, remember the DOD? It broke. Yeah. I couldn't afford to pay someone to fix it. I couldn't afford to buy another one. So I went to the library and I got a bunch of books. And I got a really crappy soldering iron from Radio Shack. And I think that's you have Bunnings there.
Yeah.
You know, just a little 30-watt weller. I'm surprised I didn't melt everything and learn how to fix it. And I went down that rabbit hole and kept tweaking on things and fixing amps. And I got a Blues Breaker reissue. This is 94, maybe. It's hard to believe that was 30 years ago. I bought a Blues Breaker reissue.
Okay. And
I found all these mods that you could do. So it was at Lord Valve's site. And so I go to Angela.com and all these places because it was the early days of the internet. This might have been after 94. Might have bought it in 94, then started to mod it like closer to 98. And I was buying crazy stuff like Riken Ohm Japanese 1% tolerance half-watt metal film resistors that were like $3 each. I mean, just the craziest of the cork sniffery. But I did all the things, and because I'd already been working on cables and pedals and stuff, it worked and it sounded great. The amp it was a really nice amp. I sold it because it was too loud, because I had not gotten far enough in my evolution to figure out how to install a good master volume. But then, you know, friends would say, hey, can you fix my pedal? Hey, can you fix my amp? And here I am. I've learned quite a bit in the years since. And along the way, guys like John Suhr and guys more on the recording end of things really helped me out a lot. But John was really nice and just gave me tips on how to use software programs, what blocking capacitors do.
How did the connection with John happen? Because I mean, I have immense respect.
We were both on a forum for kind of high-end audio gear, because I was coming into it I was a musician and I wanted to be an engineer and a producer. And by the time I got all the gear and the experience and was ready to start doing that, the industry died. There was no more, there's no more producing really on any scale. And the engineer, the studios dried up. So, but anyway, I was able to meet people way beyond my pay grade on this thing. So I met John, and I met, I used to have Grammy winners' phone numbers in my phone, and I could call them. And being a young idiot in his late 20s, I would, and I'd ask them questions, and they'd answer them. It was Usenet days before internet forums. Kind of a very insular thing. But if you ask enough stupid questions, eventually you listen. That's the thing. I listened. Whatever someone said, I wrote it down. And if they said, go get this book and read it, I went and got that book and read it. I didn't understand all of it. Sometimes I had to read it twice, because English major, haven't had math since high school. Never had an electronics class.
Wow. But you obviously have a mind that could tackle that stuff, right?
Well, because I had a side gig for a long time in computers. In 1994 rather, like I said, I was an English major and I was broke all the time, and I was working at a music store selling CDs. And there was an ad in the paper, computer technicians being hired at like $18 an hour. And I went to the interview and they said, can you do X, Y, and Z? And I lied to my teeth. And I said, absolutely. This is on a Friday. They said, great, you start Monday. I spent Saturday and Sunday at the library reading. So come Monday, I knew how to do computer work, and I was a quick learner. And it's like a party trick. You don't want to play me a Trivial Pursuit. If I read something, it's there. I can't take any credit for it, but I got very good at computers very quickly because it just made sense to me. It's a logical system, and viewing the whole system as a whole. Same with amps, computers. It's all puzzles, and it just makes sense to me.
Yep.
You can't explain it, and I can't take credit for it.
Yeah, it's interesting that you fell into English. Well, maybe you didn't fall into English, but that with a mind like that, you typically find people will follow science, physics, engineering, computer science.
You have to have a mind like that to really appreciate Faulkner.
Got it.
I mean, and I did theater, and so I have tons of useless Shakespearean soliloquies stuck in my head too. I'm fun at party. I've been invited to one.
You get invited twice, right? The second time's to go back to apologize. Is that right?
Pretty much, yeah. Oh my God, when I was younger, I was obnoxious with it, because I'd be like, "Does everyone here know how smart I am? I want to make that very, very clear and alienate everyone." I've gotten a little bit better.
Oh, that's so funny. That's awesome. So I want to go back to thanks for that, man. That's really cool. It filled in a lot of gaps for me. Can we talk about Marshalls some more, man?
Absolutely. Hey, everyone's always asking me about Fenders. Everyone's always asking me about Voxes, and I don't know why I get perceived as the low gain guy. I do Marshalls all the time, and not that it's a Marshall, but that Rust Bucket 67 Bassman that everyone was amazed with. The owner just picked it up to go use it at a studio, and he was here. He plays in a big rock band, and he uses it, and he's got Friedmans, he's got Bogners. This thing is going to kill many of them or hang with the rest of them, and it does cleans too. I know the loud stuff. I like the loud stuff.
Yeah. Well, this is true. I don't know, you are known as a kind of a Fender Voxy guy, and but I've delved deeply enough into your content to know that you're a Marshall guy too, right? And I don't know if you recognized it, but the thumbnail that I put together for the stream,
I saw that.
that photo came from your Facebook page.
Yeah.
It was your
in
photo.
stunning resolution. If you ever need to copy my logo in the future, I'll send you one that's not quite so grainy.
Oh yeah, I had
But
to rip
it kind
that
of
off.
made me happy. It's a little old school from the Facebook thing.
Yeah. Oh, the logo itself came from your website. So
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, you blew it up. That's what happened. Okay.
Yeah, it got stretched out a bit.
I would have sent you a clean vector one, but
yeah, I don't know. I just kind of.
it's all right, man. I think it's great. I think it's great.
It's all DIY. It's all DIY here, man.
Yeah, man.
So,
you're a perfectionist.
On some stuff, but mostly not. Hey, so let's talk about. So, what's your favorite Marshall? So we talked about, like the era, or I guess you said the 1983-ish was kind of when the real great era kind of fell into the net.
It's hard for me to say what my favorite is because I've not played all of them. And some of that's just the thing about being in Memphis, like Dave has been in LA. He's been doing this longer than I have. And in LA, there are many more Marshalls. So he's going to have more 66s, more 67s, and owns a 68.
Yeah.
Memphis, by and large, is still a Fender town. And the Marshalls we have here tend to be from after about 1970, 72, when they started to be imported into the United States much more. Because in the 60s, that was a very expensive, rare thing to get a Marshall. Right. And so you would find them in New York, Chicago, and LA. The rest of the country more in the 70s. And so the earliest really great one that I would say that I've played was a 72 Super Lead. And with the caveat that with any Super Lead, it will make your teeth rattle until you get the gain up above 2 o'clock, that 5 nanofarad. But if you could stand to be in the room with it when it's doing that, my God, it was a glorious thing. And that was one that had been really abused when it came in. It had been rode hard, put away wet, and I was able to bring it back the way it was supposed to be. And it was a great thing. And I still, even with the hiss of that cap, if you jumper the channels and dial in the basic cleans with your normal channel, and just bring just a touch the high treble to bring the air back in, it's almost like a high watt clean. It's that glassy, wonderful thing. It's just a real fine balancing act to get the high treble just enough.
Yeah.
But then you have wonderful cleans. But if that were my amp, I would have yanked out the high treble and then had a perfect one. I like, and I know Dave disagrees with me, I like the 50 watts in the late 70s with about 360, 380 plates, because I'm a big Lyles fan. And it does that very smooth sound that you get on like Limelight. And he was using 50 watt Marshall combos at the time. But I also like a good 2203, 2204. I've got some tricks for those.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think those low plate voltage 50 watters in that era, as long as you get the supply node for the phase inverter kind of right in terms of B plus, and then through the rest of the preamp.
I mean, Dave's not wrong. It will not have the impact on rhythm.
No,
but
there's a sweetness to them.
It's its own thing. It's its own thing.
Yeah, definitely. So, and
I guess if I had to really pick an off the shelf one, though, maybe a JTM 45.
Yeah. Okay.
That's not a reissue though.
Yeah. Yeah. The early ones. Yeah. So, like when you think about, I guess you could, I could group those Marshall circuits, and the same thing applies for other amps too, right? So when I ask this question, you can think of it more broadly than just Marshall, but very simplistically, you have master volume amps and non-master volume, right? There's pros and cons to each, obviously. Which do you prefer?
I prefer a non-master volume that I would then add a post-phase inverter master volume to, without carving up the chassis, without making any permanent mods. This can be done nicely, people.
Yeah,
nicely. I have no problem with the master volume Marshalls, but in stock form, I find them just a little bit anemic and not optimized. I think best way to put this is The stock 2203 is the same board and the same everything else as a stock 1959. The stock 2204 is the same everything else as a 1987. They just populate one part of the board differently. They're using the exact same pots with different labels on them.
Yeah.
And using two fewer input jacks, which is a really quick way to implement an idea and get it into production cheaply. They miss so many tricks. Like I'm gonna give away some secrets here.
Yeah, please do.
If you have a vertical input 800, by 800 I mean even the JMP 2203, 2204.
Yeah.
Replace the mono jacks with stereo switch jacks. And if you do that and you're clever about it, I won't tell everyone exactly how to do this, but I know Jason can figure this out. You can do two crucial things with that. You can mute the input to the phase inverter or the wiper of the master volume whenever nothing is plugged into either jack. So when you are not plugged in, the amp is dead silent. That's great because then you don't have to use standby. But also, if you have a stereo pair of jacks, you can have a very different cathode for V1B. So when you're in high gain, when you're going to the high gain input, V1B's cathode, actually it's V1A's cathode, can be 10K. Or if your lead dress is good enough, you can get that down to about 4.7K. But when you go into the clean channel, you can have a cap and resistor in parallel across that, which only connects to ground through that jack when something's plugged in. And then you can say, all right, that's going to drop down to 820, and it's going to go to add a 2 nanofarad to it. And all of a sudden, your clean channel, which is so anemic in the stock amp that you've got to turn the gain up to like 8 to have any kind of loud clean, it becomes plexi gain.
Oh, dude, that is.
Then your clean's at like 9 o'clock, and above that you have plexi tone. It's one channel of plexi just by changing the cathode by which jack you're plugged into.
This is the idea of 2023 right here. You heard it, guys. That is fucking brilliant.
Thank you. I've done it before. You can find it on my channel. I did one.
So cool.
I mean, it's so simple. It's right there, and they just didn't take advantage of it. Later, Marshalls did the thing where the phase inverter gets muted if you're not plugged in, but no one's ever done the if other people have done the cathode trick, they've not talked about it on YouTube. And you can do other things, the Dookie mod stuff, which
but that's
that's John's. I know what he did. I won't tell the world what he did. But a lot of it is just saying, oh, let's take out some bright caps and give things a little more low end, a little more gain here and there. It's a lot of cumulative things. But what I just gave you, I mean, it's like, okay, I can go between the cascaded gain and an actual plexi sound, which has that great clean, which also means you can have a bright cap, which is more effective only on the clean.
Well, it kind of means like what you described there, mate, is that when you go into the low input on a 2203, 2204 under that scenario, and if you put your master, let's just say it's on 10, basically your preamp pot is now operating exactly like a plexi. And when the circuit is a plexi, because you could parallel and you could make that into a 2K7, 0.68 microfarad bypass.
Well, it's a little different because you still have the master volume. You still have the volume before the second gain stage as opposed to after. There are ways around that, but you can't do that just with the jacks. If I were building one, I would build it very differently because I like to have the first gain stage and then a volume pot. But as a workaround in an existing 2203, 2204, it's still a lot better.
It's cool
to have an actual cathode there. The other benefit is if you have a bypass cathode there on V1B, it rejects hum a lot better in the heater supply because that unbypassed cathode can be a hum magnet, especially with like a tung salt tube in there. A lot of times I will do I'll create a 50 volt DC node and reference the heaters to that. That quiets down all the circuits an awful lot. Yep. Dave does that in the BE 100 in his screen supply, but you can add it to any Marshall with 2 resistors and 110 microfarad, 160 volt cap.
Yeah. Elevated DC. I've got a video. I've done a couple of videos on that. So yeah,
you do videos too? Wow.
Dave was the first one I saw do it, I think. I mean, it's probably an old trick, but
I'm not sure who the first person to do it was, but it's great. And it's a cheap and easy fix for any cathode bias amp as well.
Yeah. Would you tap it? If you did it in a cathode bias amp, would you tap it off the cathode resistor?
In a cathode bias amp, the cathode is going to typically be between 10 and 20 volts right there at the cathode on the output tube. I'll just lift whatever filament center tap exists in the amp, and then put some 100 ohm half watts from the heater pins on that output tube to the cathode of that output tube. Yeah, free DC lift.
Yep. Perfect.
Especially in like old Voxes, you do that and you disconnect that ground connection at the preamp tube to chassis. All of a sudden, hey, what happened to all the heater buzz? It's gone.
Yeah,
I like it when you can fix the world's problems with 2 resistors.
Yeah. 2 100 ohm resistors.
Yeah, you can use 47, you can use 220. I use 100 because I bought a huge stash of them. And then I've got what I don't show in enough videos is I'll take my box of 100 ohm resistors and I'll get out like 7 of them and measure them all until I find 2 that are matched exactly.
Yep, that's the way to do it. So I've got a for my sins, Lyle, I've accepted in a Princeton Reverb reissue.
Oh, that's a great amp once a few little things are done to it.
Well, this is it.
I know a guy who's shown you how to do it.
Yeah, the guy. Oh man, I was watching your video or your videos on this last night because the guy that dropped it off, lovely guy, is older gentleman, lives just locally here, and he dropped it off. We had a nice chat, and he wrote me a very long email, with several links to your videos.
I feel sorry for every other tech in the world that happens to. I do apologize. In your position, I would not want a client saying, hey, I saw this guy on YouTube do this thing, do this. Because it comes across as, I don't trust that you know what you're doing. And I went on WebMD and I found this. So it's an awkward thing. And I never mean to put any other techs in that position. That said, with that in mind, I work very hard not to put any bad information in the videos. Occasionally I get called out because I'll say, oh, the voltage starts to flow out of the rectifier tube, and someone will be like, voltage does not flow. I know, it's the current that flows, asshole.
Oh man. Yeah, no, he was as you said, lovely guy, very self-aware, and said, actually, you kind of preempted all of that by saying, I know you don't want me to to link other texts to try and tell you how to do your job. But,
good job,
he was cool. He's a nice dude. But he just said this, he goes, I don't actually want to change the core sound of the amp at all. I just want to make some of these reliability improvements, like pull the heaters off the board, solder them onto the octals, this kind of thing.
I mean, it's just stuff that they don't do because it would take 10 extra minutes per amp. But it's the only difference between a 74 Marshall lasting a long time and one of the Fender reissue boards, because the boards are the same crappy quality. They're both real thin boards, not a lot of copper, single trace, single layer, no through hole anything. Marshall and the old Marshalls, they moved all the hot stuff off the board. Fender keeps the hot stuff on the board.
Yep.
Move the hot stuff off the board.
Yeah.
Well, your guys' amp is in good hands now, Jace. So,
thanks, man.
Hey, taking those quick connects and just cutting them and gone.
Oh yeah, look, I saw you do that with pleasure. You could actually see, I think, on the clip I watched last night, you showed it. You could see how it was starting to blacken.
Yeah, I've had them just absolutely char, and they'll burn the board too. It's way too much current for that quick connect and that wire to handle, because the wire is crimped to the quick connect, and then the quick connect is just clamped onto the post. So that's 2 mechanical points where you don't have a good connection. And if you don't have a great connection and there's current present, it turns into heat. I'm not telling Jace this. I'm telling the rest of the world watching along.
Yeah.
Jace knows all this.
Current is the thing. I remember when I was at uni, I did a physics degree, right? It was applied physics, including electronics, and I did a placement at an electric fence manufacturer, and they had an R&D lab out there. But there was a sign on the wall that I'll never forget, and it said, It said volts, jolts, amps, kill.
Yep.
That was the safety warning.
What I tell people is that a car battery has the current to kill you. A regular 12-volt battery won't feel in the slightest, but they're both 12 volts. Meanwhile, every time you get your hand shocked on a doorknob from static electricity, that's millions of more volts. That's more volts present than there are in most lightning strikes. There's just no appreciable current. It kind of tingles a little bit.
Yeah. This is it, right?
And if I stick my hand here, I try not to do that on camera too much, but I certainly have. It's a good feeling, you know?
Well, no, you know you're alive, that's for sure.
Yeah. I feel invigorated.
Yeah, this is it.
If my hand ever starts working again, I'll be great.
Who needs coffee when you've got 450 volts DC there to wake you up? Why did you start the channel, Lyle? I mean, can we talk a bit about your channel? Because it's been massively successful, man. And
I cannot take any direct credit for that. I mean, I've been trying very hard to do good work, and I've been trying very hard in the last 2 years to increase the video quality, the audio quality, all that. So I am trying, but as far as connecting with people, I don't have a magic formula. I don't know why the algorithms have favored me. How this started off is what I do, what you do is very technical. And if I give someone a written account of what I did and they don't understand what all the words are, it doesn't really convey anything to them. And personally, if I take my car to the mechanic and I think it needs an oil change and they say, sorry, you really need a new transmission, I would never really know if I needed that transmission. I needed that extra work. I thought it just needed an oil change. And so mechanics never say, here's the video. We show this bushing is wearing out and it's all these bits of metal are now in your gear case. You need a new transmission. They just say it needs a new transmission. I didn't like being in that position myself. So what I started doing when the first cell phones had pretty good cameras is I would take pictures of everything and I would pop it on Facebook. Started just emailing people, but then I do it on Facebook so people could go there because I could put more pictures up there and say, all right, this is a picture of your input jack. And here I'm showing that the little bit of metal that's supposed to contact ground is not contacting ground. So the input jack, your amp hums. I have to change this input jack so that it'll ground out and then the problem goes away. And I show that sequence with explanations in English. And, and it's just started little things like that. Or here's how you have a bad output transformer. It's rare, but it happens. Here's how I diagnosed it. So people would know that I'm not selling them a transmission. And other people really seem to like these pictorials. But they took a long time to do it. I take the picture and then go back and type everything. And then the video quality and the storage on phones got so good. Pardon me. So screw writing all that stuff. I'll just say, hey, I'm going through this amp and the screen grid resistor here is burned. You can see here. And, I could just change this resistor, but I need to make sure that something didn't cause that. So it could be a bad output tube. It could be a bad cap in the filter supply. Could just be a bad solder joint. Let's go through all these things, so the owner of the amp would get this and see what the diagnosis was and why, and approve it or not approve it, or they'd know that they were not sold a transmission they did not need. Other people liked watching that. And I had all these videos up on my Facebook channel, hundreds of them, and they're all titled and categorized, and Facebook changed something in their infinite wisdom, and all the titles went away. So you couldn't go back and look at search for deluxe reverbs or 67, whatever. And I put all this work into it. I only had 2,000 people following me. So I was like, well, F it, let's try YouTube. And it quickly took off. I don't know why, but I'm grateful to each and every one of you.
Have you noticed a pattern at all with a particular type of video that has helped the channel more than others? It's more popular, it drives more subs, have you any insights on the formula there? Because I'm taking notes.
Well, the Amps Under 500 and the Amps Under $1,000 videos I've done have by far been the most, like 200 plus thousand each. And then people find the channel through those, and those have gotten shared an awful lot.
Good ones.
I mean, if I were in this just to be a YouTube channel, amps under 2,000 would have hit 6 months ago, and I'd be like, amps that like your aunt, amps to take to dinner. I'd be doing all kinds of videos just to get clicks. But I'll do a video on, say, I did one on mods any owner can do to their Fender reissues, and that'll sit there and do pretty well. But then all of a sudden it'll do really well, and I'm like, okay, that got shared on a Fender forum somewhere. I can tell when certain videos hit forums, because I'll get a whole bunch of new commenters on a video, a whole bunch of new views, and it's an influx, equal parts, people telling me I'm a genius and telling me I'm a moron. And you just got to tune both sides out, because you can't let people, you can't be defined by that. YouTube comments, it changes all the time. I'm not going to say, hey, YouTube says I'm a genius, but neither am I going to let some idiot tell me I'm a moron. And it was a hard lesson for me to learn not to fire back at all the cretins.
It is a tricky thing, man. And because you can get drawn into that for sure. Do you read all the comments?
I try to read all the comments. I can't reply to all of them because they've gotten too many, but I try to, especially when a video is first hit, I try to reply as many as I can. I read pretty much all of them. The ones which are obnoxious, sometimes I'll delete them because they're just people that I don't want in my life. They're just rude and hostile. And sometimes they're just really stupid. And I think everyone else can see that they're stupid. So I don't worry about it. But one of the things I realize is that not many people read other people's comments. They want people to respond to theirs. So if someone is doing obvious trollery and gets nothing, they move on. Yeah.
It's funny. We have the same experience. And I think some of them, I mean, I've done that. I mean, I've, definitely deleted stuff because I just think it's like, it's just downright bloody rude, right? And
it's just the this kids today with their hair and their clothes. There's just a culture on YouTube comments. I did a video on the Yamaha Reus, and I was talking about how they've got these little 33 nanofarad or 3.3 nanofarad caps in series with the pickups in certain positions. I said, well, it's gonna roll off a little bit of the low end because a cap followed by resistance to ground. It's also going to shift the phase just a little bit, not a full 180, just a little cap. The little cap's going to shift the phase, so you get a little phasey thing. And the guy's like, "Oh, those are just standard tone caps. Caps don't change phase." Actually, I'm like, I just can't understand the mentality of someone doing that. If I were to go to a channel on a subject, and I'm like, okay, 40-something thousand people like this. It's got like 900 videos on this subject. I read something about it once. I think I'll argue with the guy. I mean, it'd be like me arguing with Neil deGrasse Tyson. I mean, I'm not putting myself on that level, but sometimes sit on your hands because, if you have two signals being combined and one of them is fed through a capacitor, the phase changes. And that's like the third week of any electronics course. Go. Those books await you. Read. Become a better person. And do it the hell off my channel.
Did you ever have a moment where you thought, this is all too much work. I can't. I'm gonna throw the towel in, like on the channel.
Not to that extent. Just a second. I have got to send something up to my wife. I get burned out from time to time.
Yeah,
I got burned out really bad. Last January, February. The whole COVID thing with parts delays had really thrown my business for a loop. And I'm still playing catch up. And I try to put a good face on things. But when an amp takes months to get done because I'm waiting for something. And I had so many amps piling up because I couldn't get transformers. Mercury with Patrick dying, that became non-available for a while they got their house in order. Habor has been out of stock on everything for forever. Classic tone was gone. I've had some issues, had supply chain issues for a long time, and then some other issues I won't get into with Hammond. But I'd have like 5 amps that I just could not do because we're waiting for the iron. 47 microfarad axial caps were out of stock for like a year and a half, and people got mad at me So yeah, that was a real stressful period, and I'm pretty much pulled out of that now. I've got one or two things I'm still trying to finish up, just because I gotten so far behind, and I'm slow to accept new work as a result. People are always like, "Hey, are you going to take my app? Are you going to take my app?" No, not yet. I will. I promise. Um, and then some family stuff behind the scenes. I was really stressed, and so I did what any sane person would do. We went to Europe for a week, week and a half. We went to Paris, we went to Vienna, and I didn't think about amps, and I didn't think about blah blah blah. And I looked at what people had created that things that have lasted, things of beauty, and it was a spring, and I was not in these four walls, and I came back refocused, much more positive, with an intention to keep improving at what I do, because I mean, it doesn't matter what I do. It's never going to be at the level of Da Vinci or Rodin, but damn, that stuff's inspirational.
Yeah.
Thank you, love.
That's cool. I remember the you getting more coffee?
Absolutely. The coffee fairy.
That's so awesome. Look, I think, gee, was it last year? I think it must have been last year. Last year was incredibly difficult from a supply perspective.
Oh yeah,
because I went through all that, that drama as well. I was trying to get that, my amp out to market that I'd been working on, and the
Alta 100 for those wondering.
Yeah, the Alta 100, yeah. And I'd gone in on a transformer order with Shay, my buddy Shay at NonMass Amps. And we put a combined order in with Haber. And this was when they were way, way, way behind. Like you made reference to that, right? And I think we waited, nearly 10 months. And it was, we had like an order of maybe 40 units between us, like 40 full sets, combination of 50, because Shay's building 50 watts. So I was starting with 100. They finally came through, right? Obviously, because we got the amp out, and we've kind of been building with that order ever since. But and I understand that they've caught way up now, right? So it's kind of like the lead times are nothing like what they were. But it was very, I mean, there were moments there last year where I just thought, this is not going to happen. Like this, just forget about it, Jason.
Yeah, I mean, it was maddening. And the thing is, on the one hand, it gave me hope. On the other hand, it was very frightening. The camera that you're seeing me through, that has really helped my channel, I wanted to buy this 2 years ago. It's a ZV-E10 Sony, and Sony could not sell it for about 2 years because of a chip shortage, which was all caused by COVID. And I tried the RevStar that's here for me to work on. I tried to order a RevStar, and if Sony and Yamaha, who are the 8,000-pound gorillas in our industry, could not get product shipped because Sony couldn't sell the cameras, and Yamaha couldn't get the guitars in stock, and they're still having hard times getting RevStars in stock. Maybe I should feel better on the one hand that, if they can't do it, why should anyone expect me to? On the other hand, if Sony and Yamaha can't fill orders, that's really scary for the rest of us.
Yeah, if they can't get it, what hope do we have? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Now, the last thing I want to ask you about,
sure,
Lyle, other than, no doubt we'll be able to drill into a whole bunch of stuff based on some of the stuff that's in the chat already. There's quite a lot. We'll get to that, guys. We'll get to it, guys. I know we haven't even gone to there yet, but we will. Your own designs, right? Because one of the things that I remember a chat that you and I had on Facebook Messenger, and it was a while ago. It was probably one of the first chats we had, maybe a year ago. We chatted about PCB manufacturers, and I chatted to you about who I was getting.
Yeah, and I got some SVT. I used that company whose name escapes me, but I've got written down some boards for drop-in replacements for SVTs, so I don't have to do all the can caps. I can just put in nice radials. I actually have that design for the new and improved Excalibur, but I need to spend the time to design an entire new chassis. Getting to know Mr. Friedman and some of his associates, I have an opportunity to have fabricated chassis, which would be much better than getting chassis from Mojo Tone, which is what I was doing for the prototypes. But in order to do that, I've got to spend about a week doing nothing but that project.
Yeah.
And I don't have that week because I have so many amps to work on. 20 years ago, I just would have not slept for a week and I would have gotten it done, but I can't do that to myself anymore. But you know the difference. You guys say, all right, well, traditional spacing here is 1 and 3 and 1 and 5/8, but this manufacturer does everything in millimeters. So okay, I've got to figure out what my millimeter spacing is for everything consistent. I can do all the way out, and then I got to talk to whoever does the actual fabrication to take my 2D stuff and make it into a 3D model. Because, as you know, if you want a chassis that's 8 inches deep with 2-inch high sides, that's not 2, 2, and 8. That so it's not 12 inches. They've got to know how much metal it takes to make that curve, and once that curve is made, what's the surface area for a panel? So I need to design something where the transformers go in. I had designed the first prototypes with Patrick at Mercury, and I don't have a relationship with the guy at Mercury now. I need to rebuild that or see if Habor has something that I can use. Hammond has something I might be able to use, but I had some problems with Hammond's quality. So I would need to order a bunch of those. And so all the pricing I'd had for that 2 years ago, it's gone out the window. I need more knees.
Yeah, it is. And I think we were just chatting before we came on air, guys. And one of the things that Lyle asked me was how I was, because anyone who follows my channel and people that are on here presumably do would know that I left my day job about 4 months ago to do this full time, where I was kind of doing, I was doing 4 days a week in the day job and 3 days on Head First. Now I'm doing like 7 days a week on Head First. And that knowing not knowing, but managing your own time the most effectively has been one of the most challenging things to kind of get my head around in this early period of doing this full time. Because as you wake up every day, there's a million things you could do. I've got a stack of amps sitting out there that need repair or modding or whatever. I've got builds to do, like our own actual production amps to do. I've got, do I do a YouTube video? Do we do this, set up this next live stream? Do I do some design work? I've got, changes I want to make to chassis files, all kinds of stuff. And it's knowing how to, not knowing, but like managing that time most effectively it's not easy, right? And I think one of the things I've concluded on is that having some variety in what you do day to day helps to keep it fresh. You know what I mean? Like, so I would, rather than kind of spend a week on one thing, I will tend to, okay, today's design day, so I'm going to spend the day in AutoCAD or whatever. Today is amp mod day, so I'm doing mods on amps just for that day. But I won't do it for 5 or 7 days in a row or whatever, right? Because it becomes too.
Yeah. Well, I have a beautiful board design for that model. I've got to go through and do the chassis stuff, but in order to really finalize the chassis stuff, you have to have the examples of the iron. Yeah. And know that it's kind of that Lucy's not going to pull that football away from you. I feel like in 2020, the world was just full of Lucy's going, you can't kick it. And it's one thing to say, can you design an amp? Sure, I can design an amp. I could design a fantastic amp in 30 minutes. Designing an amp is not the same thing as planning how the amp gets built. And how the amp gets built to be serviced and to be supported. And can anyone go in there and see what's going on if I get hit by a bus? When you say, well, not everything is going to be handmade by Sylvan elves in a forest glen and then covered in blue goop, you got to step back and say, what's the best way to do this? And you saw the board that I designed. I designed it so that if you had that amp in, you're like, okay, I disconnect these 2 heater wires and take off these 8 screws, and the entire board flips up towards the front panel, and I can access everything here. Oh, I love this guy. And if I had any way to not have those 2 heater wires, then you just remove the screws and the whole thing flips up for full access. But that's the kind of thing as a tech, you see that you're like, oh my God, somebody loves me. This was designed by a kind soul, which also means it's kind for the owner, because the owner's going to have a very modest repair bill down the line versus, oh, well, he had to do a Mesa and disconnect every wire, every pot and every transformer to pull the board up. And 4 of the old heat stressed plastic standoffs broke in the process.
Again, I don't know whether you remember this, Lyle, but I sent you some pretty detailed gut shots of the altar.
Yep.
It would have been a year ago, right? It would have been, because
a year and a half. Yeah.
Yeah. It was before, or it was just about the time that I was kind of putting it up for, for sale, I guess.
It was before your knee.
Yeah. Well, that was a year ago. 26th of October last year. I'm looking at the date here when I look over there. 12th of October now. So 26th of October last year, I had that knee operation, and we had, I think we'd only put out about 5 amps at that point, all sold in Australia before we started selling in the US. Yeah, because I mean, it was really cool because it's just kind of the opportunity came up when we were chatting, and I was like, I'm going to send you, I said, I'm going to send Lyle these pictures. And it was with an equal mix of hope and fear that I sent you those pictures.
My evil plan is working.
Please be kind. But it was really cool. Like I mean, I'm so glad I did, right? Because you gave me some really helpful comments, and you said, hey, this looks good. You should think about implementing this and this and this and this. So you gave me a handful of things, which I did. In a subsequent revision, I put those in.
Hey, anything I can do to help, it's cool. And I am not sitting at the top of a mountain distributing knowledge to people. Jason has helped me out on stuff. We all help each other out on this. No one knows everything, So
yeah,
none of us are in competition with each other. There's enough pie for everyone. Though it looks like I've had too much.
No, man, no. All right, hey, that was a cool. What are we at? 50 minutes already. Awesome. I'm going to go to some of these comments, guys, and we've got quite a lot. Right at the beginning, hey, Mark. Mark's always here, man. It's always awesome to see you, Mark. I thought this comment here was quite funny, so I wanted to show it. Mustard caps. I do not know how they affect tone, but they sure look nice. That's true. That actually prompts us a question for you, Lyle, on this one. How big a impact do coupling caps make, do you think? Different brands, different types.
That's a really tricky thing, because you would have to really know the answer in any different circuit. You would have to be able to compare all the caps being changed at once. So say you'd go from all mustard caps to all Mallory 150Ms, or all polyester to all polypropylene all at once. I've done that in smaller amps. To know for myself, I would have literally everything switched. It was a pain in the butt to set up. But all right, it wouldn't be like one button, everything switched, but it'd be like, all right, play it, click, 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 click. And then all of a sudden, okay, now I'm going through orange drops. And what I've come to realize is that in some amps, it doesn't matter. In other amps, at certain parts of the circuit, it does matter. In other parts, it does not. Still, in other amps, it matters on the models which have voltage above X, and the ones with a lower voltage, it matters less. I've discovered through other testing, and this is blind testing I've done, where I had a rotary switch, a 5-way rotary switch. I did not know what I was selecting. I had my wife write A, B, C, D, E, whatever. And I would turn it, and then I would take notes for myself. And then it was a big rotary switch, so I would have her, I would have her switch it for me as well. I could hear subtle differences in picofarad value caps. And there are certain picofarad value caps that I prefer the sound of. Spoiler, I like the Vishay 562 series, and I like the Murata MLCs an awful lot. Doesn't matter in every amp, doesn't matter in every part of an amp, but in a tone stack, in a bright cap, a treble bypass cap in a Marshall, they make subtle, small differences. And if enough subtle, small differences add up, that can be an appreciable difference. Like, if I can do this without electrocuting myself, because it is plugged in.
I love it. Let's have a look at this thing. Show it.
This is a 69 Deluxe Reverb.
Awesome.
I'm rebuilding for a buddy. And I'm doing it like this. You will notice this 20 nanofarad blue cap here is a ceramic disc. It's a 1 kilovolt ceramic disc as opposed to a film right here. Can't see what I'm doing. That blue one there.
Yeah. I can see
most people put films in there. And film caps sound really good. But the old 64, 65, some 66s had ceramic discs there from the Fender factory. And ceramic discs behave differently at different frequencies when the stage begins to clip. They're affected by humidity and temperature. That one not as much as the old Z5s Fender used. And they impart a certain, maybe really lame and say airiness, because they are slightly microphonic. And so I could put a 22 nanofarad polyurethane, not polyurethane, polypropylene 716p in there. I could put a 400 volt polyester 220p in there. And I could have that ceramic cap. They'd all sound slightly different, because that's one of the stages in a Fender where that cap makes a difference. It's still early. The earlier in the amp circuit that you make these changes, the more impact they have, because everything at the input gets amplified thousands of times. Everything towards the output gets amplified tens of times.
Very true.
Tell me I'm full of shit. We need to have some conflict here. There's no good story without conflict. English major.
Yeah. This is fantastic, Matt. Peter says it's incredible the amount of knowledge all these live Q&As have to offer. Curious to hear your takes on Jensen getting back into the guitar speaker game. I don't know anything about that. Lyle, do you?
Well, hold on one second. Previous question was asking about mustard caps. If they're original mustard caps and the epoxy ends haven't broken, don't touch them, don't change them. They're great as long as they're not leaking DC. Those things tend to last a really long time if they've not been stressed. And whether they sound better or worse than anything else, if they're original, they're intrinsically valuable just for that.
Leave them alone. Yeah.
Jensen, I'm all over the map with current Jensens. The C12K is used in a lot of the Deluxe Reverb reissues. It's one of the worst speakers in the world. Some of the Italian Jensen Alnicos are pretty good once they break in. The trouble is, in my experience, they take about a year to break in. They're very bright. But I've not tried all of their speakers. I don't much care for the MODs unless it's for something like a champ with an 8-inch speaker, where an 8-inch speaker doesn't really, you're not going to get anything great out of it. So I want to hear more Jensens before I have a better opinion. I'd like to have a better opinion of them, but I've not heard anything from them that rivals, say, their old C12Ns.
Awesome. We're slowly week by week, we're converting Ben away from the digital realm back into tube amps. So,
well, here's the thing, Ben. You can have both.
You can. You can even have them both on at the same time.
That's right.
Working together. Ben goes on to say, the thought of building my own amp, I guess, is very exciting. Do you have a recommendation for anyone? Like, what's your suggestion, Lyle, for anyone starting out?
If anyone's starting out, I've said this before, don't build an amp. My God, don't build an amp. Build pedals. Build a fuzz. Build a tube screamer. Make all your mistakes at 9 volts. So if it doesn't work, you're out $40 and some time. You're not going to electrocute yourself. Nothing's going to catch on fire. If you can sit down at your kitchen table over a weekend and build 20 of the same pedal and have them all work the first time, all of them neat work, no issues when you rattle it, and you understand the circuit. You understand what it is that you're doing. You're not just connecting the dots. You get to the point where you're like, hey, this is a tube screamer, and on this side of the tone pot, it's doing this to the treble. This side is doing this to the negative, and on that op amp, okay, well then I've got a resistor to ground, and it's got a bypass cap there, and that affects the amount of low end the stage has. And here's the negative feedback loop, and that sets the gain for this stage. If I increase that, I have more gain. If I decrease it, it has less gain. Oh, if I increase it too much, it starts to oscillate. What value cap can I put across that? Once you get to the point where you understand the pedal circuit and you can build the pedal circuit, you will have developed your soldering skills, you will have developed your troubleshooting skills, you will develop a sense of workmanship. Then build a champ kit, the world's simplest tube amp, one or two tubes and a speaker. And I don't care if it's a Mojo Tone, I don't care if it's Tube Depot, don't get the Weber kits, they're crap, but go build a champ kit and go easy, because if you make a mistake, you have 350 volts, things can catch on fire. Do that successfully. Look at the circuit. How does its tone circuit work? How does its cathode bypass cap work? All these things. Oh, wait, that's a lot like how that op amp worked. Oh, wait, that's how that transistor worked. You'll begin to have a sense of the whole game plan.
Get connections.
Then you can build up from there. Don't start with a Princeton. Don't start with a Marshall Super Lead. Don't start with a 2203. Champ all the way. After many pedals.
There's very wise counsel there. I'm going to go to a super chat and then we'll come back to the main questions here. But so Burke's put something, and thanks for the super chat, man. I appreciate that. Thoughts on a post phase inverter master volume for a 2204? Yeah, interesting. I'll have a first crack at this. I've never liked post phase inverter master volumes in master volume amps. Like an amp like a 2204 is, we might argue that it's not the best circuit that could have ever been, but it's a circuit that delivers gain from the preamp, and it has a master volume just prior to the phase inverter, and that's part of its character, I think.
I'm gonna sound like I'm arguing with you, but I'm not really. In theory, it could be beneficial to have a pre-phase inverter and a post-phase inverter master volume. In theory. In reality, the owner will always spend their time saying, should I use more of this or less of that or the other? You get option paralysis. Better just to have one system. The 2204 has got a pretty good master volume in it. I prefer post-phase inverter master volume to the pre, but I would not modify a 2204 to have that. It already has a quite good master volume. It can be improved slightly. You could look into some bootstrapping things, but that's beyond the scope of this. But a 2204 already has enough knobs and options on it. You don't need to have two master volumes and wonder, oh, should I run this at 2 o'clock and this one at 10 o'clock or both of them at 3:30? Set up, play your guitar. I mean that seriously. The less you can think about that box on stage behind you, the more you can make music. So get something that works, that sounds good, and then don't overthink it.
This is true. I think the only thing I'd add to that, maybe to help answer the question for Burke himself, is, are you a fan of effects loops in amps, and do you like effects that you put in, time-based effects in an effects loop? Do you like them to be super studio quality, pristine kind of thing, right? Because a post-phase inverter master, you'll typically find that time-based effects in an effects loop will still distort. Because once
I can argue with you there. I'm arguing with Dave last Saturday on the same subject. A well-implemented effects loop that would be suitable, really suitable for use in a 2204 would have a send and return level. So you could control all that within the effects loop. You could say, all right, I'm gonna use this with a -10 effect. I'm not going to turn down the send at all. I'm going to use this with a -20 negative 30 instrument level effect. I'm going to turn it down to 30. Then I can use makeup gain, but I can always control the level being fed to the phase inverter, in which case the return level of the effects loop could be that pre-phase inverter master volume you're talking about. So it's not, I think Dave presented it too much black and white, and it can be black and white on a lot of very simple implementations. I'm just saying from a design point of view, a post-phase inverter master volume and an effects loop can work well together, but with any of these things, there's trade-offs. You can't run either of those amps the same way you would a non-master volume 1972.
This all comes down to how hard are you smashing that phase inverter?
Yeah.
You know, like
as hard as you're smashing that like button. Sorry. Yeah, I love to do the YouTube cheese on someone else's channel.
Hit that freaking like button. It's a bit like John Sir, back to John, who I have enormous. I don't know John. I've never met him, but I have huge respect for him. I'm a massive fan.
It's horrible. Avoid him at all costs.
I've got like 3 Sir guitars and like a couple of Sir amps. I love their stuff. Mm-hmm. Yeah. SL68. All right, his take on the Super Lead, and I've seen him comment on this too. Right, no effects loop in that amp, and he never will put one in because he's built that circuit with a factory post phase inverter master, and he's expecting people to run the channel volumes up 6, 7, 8, or whatever, right? Like an EV8 style setup. In which case, the phase inverter has been driven so much into overdrive that you can put an effects loop in it, but your effects are still will distort because as soon as they go into that phase inverter, they're going to be overdriven. So yeah, I think what does Dave say? It depends.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing, guys. Think about it this way. Earlier today, I put a video up of the owner of those 2 Dr. Z Route 66s playing his amps. He was testing them before he took them home. Those things don't have reverb. They don't have effects loops. They don't have tremolo. So he's playing them. I put a mic in front of the cab. It was dry. In one section of the video, I added a little basic reverb and delay so you could hear kind of what that amp would sound like in a typical mix situation. So here's the dry. Oh, here's like 30 seconds with basic reverb and delay, and the rest of it was dry again, just to give people an idea of how that translates. In post, that took me all of 10 seconds to set up. So if you're recording, you don't have to have an effects loop. You add it there. If you're doing it live and you're serious, and your sound is a 68 plexi cranked or John's version of a 68, the microphone that you send to front of house can be split and can be sent to a mixer, which then has aux sends, which send out to all your effects, and the returns of those effects can come back both into another pair of XLRs that feed out to your house and to a stereo pair, or just one mono if you want, of basically a neutral PA speakers for all your wet stuff. And you have your studio everything on stage. And you could probably build that if you scale your expectations down. Say you've got a 20-watt Friedman or the PT15.
Yep.
And then like a 100-watt small PA from Bose for that stuff. You could have a mobile studio for like $2,000, $2,500.
Yeah.
But then you're putting the sound of the speaker through the effects instead of putting the effects through the speaker.
Yeah. This is it's all true. Sonny says, "Hey Lyle, amp tech god." There you go.
Are you a god, Ray? Sonny, I appreciate that, but nah, man. If people tell me that is just as bad for me as people tell me I'm a moron. I appreciate the intent, but thank you.
It's very nice. Lyle called you an Australian in a video the other day. Kiwi Brandon. Well, I'm a New Zealander by birth. This is true.
Oh, are you? I did not know. I knew you lived in Melbourne. Sorry.
I do live in Melbourne, yeah. Been here for 20 years.
All right. Well, see, here's the thing. I'm a massive geek, and Tolkien is one of my favorite authors. I have listened to every appendix of the extended edition of Lord of the Rings a million times. I'm very good at spotting pure Kiwi accents. Jason, your accent has shifted. Your accent has shifted in the past 20 years.
I know. It's
you're not quite. Oh, I can't do it right now. I'm a little congested, but you're not quite up there as much as many of the Kiwis I've heard.
it's a funny thing, and like anyone who's who's moved, right, will know this experience probably, is that you get to the point where there's this kind of middle ground where when you go back home, everyone says, "Oh man, you sound like a bloody Australian," but the Aussies still immediately identify you as a Kiwi because they can hear it. And then eventually, after about maybe 10 years or whatever, it's only maybe 20% of the people that you meet here will go, "Oh, you're a New Zealander,"
Mm-hmm.
So it's still like people still pick it here, but not everyone.
Yeah.
But when I go back
if you're in the same room, I might hear it different. I've only heard you online, but I was at a coffee shop a couple of years ago, and some girls were at a table talking, and I walked over and said, "Hey, where in New Zealand are you from?" And they were shocked because everyone in America had assumed they're Australians.
Oh, yeah.
I am usually pretty good at it, but you with your 20 years in Melbourne threw me off.
Yeah.
Oh, look, I was hanging out with a drunk Glaswegian 6 months ago, and I could understand 90% of what he said. So I feel like I deserve a medal for that.
That's pretty good. Pretty good, all right. Scott says, Jason, tell us why we never see you working on messes. It's because I've watched enough videos from Lyle and Brad.
He knows better.
To know better.
He has options. He's got his fancy head first company. He doesn't have to slum around with the likes of me. I'm going to be declining messes in the future. I've got 2 here, 2.5 here, which are about to leave, and then I'm not going to take any more messes. My hair is gray enough. Life is short enough.
Yeah, I've been asked a bunch of times. From guys that I know as well who have picked up, like there's a guy, Pete, who I've worked on. He's got a nice collection of Marshalls that I've worked on, and he just picked up it was a Mark III. I think it was a Mark III on the secondhand market, and of course it's got problems with it. So he calls me, and I said, "Man, I'm sorry. Yeah. I'm really sorry, but I'm not going to touch it." just no. I'm curious, but I'm not stupid. Ben says, yeah, be honest, neither of you guys are here without Marshall. Hey, we don't. I mean, I love Marshall, and I think Lyle does too, right?
I'm not criticizing. I am criticizing Marshall. I'm criticizing Marshall because, first of all, Marshall would not be here without Leo. But all that said, all the great music done with Marshalls up through the early 80s, it saddens me how far they've fallen. Hey, on my channel, Technical Difficulties, January, February, I've got lined up a guy who used to be a VP at Fender and at Marshall, responsible for a lot of the Marshall stuff that we still loved in the 80s. So don't pass judgment on me and Jace. Wait till you get to hear what my friend says, who was there at the time, who watched the change and got the hell out of Dodge.
Wow.
We're not making uninformed opinions about this stuff.
That's going to be fascinating. And that'll be in the new year. Yeah.
Yeah. That'll be January, February. I got to talk to my bud and figure out days and times that it works out. I've got so many great guys coming. I'm going to have you on there too. Yeah, cool. I've got great guys coming. And Jason.
And you. I like how you did that. Yeah. That's cool.
Sorry with Brad, so our standards aren't that high.
Speaking of the devil, there he is. Yeah. Hey man. I like this. Scott says you can stop yelling. That was, I think, in response to Ben's all caps.
I thought I was just being loud again. Sorry.
Yeah.
I find it very freeing not to have to look at the chat or anything, and the questions just magically pop up. This is a great stress relief. So.
It's a lot of work, isn't it, trying to host one of these things?
Oh yeah.
People have no idea how hard we have to work.
It's uphill both ways in the snow.
Brad says I wouldn't be here if it weren't for all the amp companies that do dumb shit.
Yeah. Hey, give me just a second. I'm gonna run to the bathroom. I'll be right back.
Yeah, all right, man. It's all good. Yeah, so I'll just make my way through the chat here, guys. There's a lot of conversation here about these amps. Scott says dumbasses like me that know enough to be dangerous. Hey Scott, I know you were on last week's stream. You had a bunch of questions about your Hayes 15. I don't know whether that got resolved, man, but I think I said to you, right? Post. I don't know if you're on Facebook or not, but if you are, join the Evolve DIY Builders group and post your stuff in there, man. I'll jump into it and see if I can help. If not, feel free to email me, man, and I'll do my best. Brad says, if I built my first amp, does this mean I built my first amp before Lyle? A Dick Smith stereo hi-fi power amp kit in '93. Man, they used to have a whole range of kits, didn't they? I'd love to know a bit more about that. Was that a solid state kit, Brad? I'm assuming it was. Let's have a look here. Ben says, you build a kit, not your own design. Fenders and Marshalls had their own design. That means they created it. You just copied it. I don't know about that, man. Everything's copied off everything. And we know I think we all know where the JTM 45 came from. Clyde says, question for both of you. Who are the two most important amp builders not named Leo? Well, I'm gonna answer this probably on my own personal perspective. I don't know if I can name two, but I can name a builder that absolutely inspired me to get back into building. I started by doing a few kits. Right? So I didn't actually do the pedal thing. I just went straight into building tube amps. But I had studied electronics previously. I wasn't coming from a cold start, so I kind of knew enough about theory and had some practical behind me. But the guy that actually inspired me to pick up soldering iron again and really get into it seriously was Dave Friedman. And it wasn't because I knew Dave or I'd been speaking with him or anything like that. It was because I listened to and played through some of the stuff that he was starting to come out with, and it just blew me away. And I thought I just kind of had this need to get into seeing if I could, create something that might rival that or, come to the same level. So for me personally, Dave's been a huge inspiration.
I would say Lupe and Rosa. They were the actual amp builders back in the day. Whenever I get an old tweed Fender in and that little bit of masking tape is there that still says Lupe, I'm like, yes, you go, girl.
Yeah, nice.
But I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just want to give a shout out to a lot of people who made this stuff back in the day that we never get talked about. Don Randall, all the people on the production line, and only the Lupes and Rosas of the world whose names do we know. And I've seen a Lucy or a Lucia as well.
And I don't know all these old names.
And hey, I tell you what, all the little old ladies working for JMI, doing all the wiring harnesses, fresh from their World War II RAF training. The standard of wiring in the UK in the 50s and 60s was phenomenal. That led directly to the guy at Hiwatt, whose name escapes me right now. Why do names escape me? But just those beautiful looms that you only find in RAF airplanes and tanks from the 40s. I don't think that any company has ever consistently made an amp as well as Fender did up to about 1972. There are some that are better built at a much higher price point. The thing you have to remember, though, also that the Fenders were never cheap. If you go back and look at the price list for a 65 Deluxe Reverb, that's a $3,000 amp today, $2,700. Fenders were never cheap amps, but you certainly got what you paid for. Much more expensive than most of their competition, but they're still around. Marshall, as great as they can be, they had some really weird construction concepts over the decades.
They did, and they also had a tendency to, in the need to just keep the production line running. And I'm sure you've seen this because I know I have. Just weird values from the factory that was just like substituted parts that, hey, the amp still worked, but so far out of spec that this thing's for 40 years people have been wondering why it didn't sound great.
There's a guy who's at Ampeg, I can't remember his name, which is a shame. I was watching Keith Williams' 5 Watt World, his video on the B15. The guy who designed the B15, I think he later did the SVT as well. As far as designs on paper, as far as the circuit being drawn, incredible things. As far as the physical execution of them, well, the B15's miles ahead of the V4 and SVT, which really, it's amazing they didn't all catch on fire about 1978 at the same time, because from the get-go in '69 they were really poorly made and flimsy, and they continue to be very flimsy to this day. If you buy a brand new Classic or Heritage, odds are if you take it on the road, you'll need service twice a year at a very inflated price. But the design of especially the B15 is beautiful. I wish I could remember his guy's name.
I'm sure it'll come to you. PF says, Jason and Lyle, I have a 1981 2204 and built a kit to replace it for gigs. So you're saying that you bought a 2204 kit as a replica of your 81? I think that's what you're saying. Recommendations for a quality effects loop mod for the kit. I'm told it is blasphemy. Well, I wouldn't say it was blasphemy to put a loop,
especially if you're putting in a kit. Unless you sell one, Jace, get the Metropolis loop. It's great. Yeah, it's not expensive. Drops in. Great instructions. It works fine. You put it between the. You can put it between the master volume and the phase inverter. Or you can put it between the tone stack and the master volume. Your choice. Depends on what level your effects need to run at. Yeah.
I have a bare board. So for a DIY person who wants to actually populate the board, like just buy the PCB and then you order the parts yourself and put it together, then you can grab that from me rather than it. You
have that available in the States too.
Mm-hmm.
Well, put that link in the description or whatever, or guys go to his website. Yeah. I'm sure it's there. So I did not know that you offered that. Otherwise, I would have listed you first.
That's all right. No.
For a turnkey, the Metropolis is pretty good. The Metropolis and yours and the Friedman, they're all LND 150 designs, right?
Yeah, it's LND 150 loop. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they're all variations on good.
Yeah. It's all kind of that original, I think, Stephen Miller design.
Yeah.
So yeah, I always wire them in a 2204. I would normally wire it straight off the treble wiper into the loop, and those loops have the first resistor that's actually on the loop board. You can move that from sort of 470k to maybe 2.2 meg, somewhere around there. You can play with it to get the input level into the loop, right? And then you've got if your master volume is post loop, it means you can plug something into the return of that and use it as a power amp if you ever need that situation, and you've got a volume for the power amp. Or you do what Lyle suggested before. Actually, you can actually wire those with a send level and a return level, if you like. Give you complete flexibility over it. Similar question, I think, here from Carson, which says, I'm adding a tube buffered effects loop to an 800. So let's assume it's a 2204 or 2203. I know the input is supposed to come off the treble wiper. There you go. But does the return go straight to the phase inverter or to the master volume pot? Well, if you're sending off the treble wiper into the loop, then you'd want to then go to your master volume.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you'll have no volume in the amp.
Yeah. Here's the thing with the two buffered effects loop: they're not all created equal.
True.
Before you connect it to your amp, be damn sure that there's no DC present on the input or output. Because you may need to add a coupling cap between the loop return and the input of that master volume, or do it within the two buffered effects loop. I don't see the point of most tube effects loops. You're adding a lot of hiss and opportunity for breakage for no good reason, in my opinion.
I agree. I mean, and certainly from a design perspective, I would never go down that route now. I think there's a lot of amps that use them, but I think it was probably before, I think there's pretty broad industry acceptance of an LND 150 style.
And even before the 150 came out, the numbers and letters, guys. IRF 820 series was pretty staggering. You'd have to knock it down to like 200 volts versus the full 350 that an LND will take. But for the last 15 years, we've been spoiled for choice in MOSFETs, and the LND 150s are staggeringly good. And most people could not hear the difference between that and a 12AX7 in a non-high gain application, though people have done really great impressions of high gain tubes with them. Except that you'd say, hey, what happened to all the hiss?
Yeah. This is it. Geeseberry says, I learned from watching one of Jason's videos that Aussies call alligator clips crocodile clips. Yeah. Well,
Well, it makes sense that way. It's alliterative. Otherwise, it's just allegorical.
It's the Steve Irwin clip. Steve Hunter says, yes, I was talking about your Princeton Reverb reissue, Steve. So, yeah, man, you're breaking new ground for me by bringing that in. So I'm looking forward to working on it actually, and I'll be messaging my buddy here, Lyle, if I need some help with it. For sure. Max says, looking at getting an oscilloscope, any recommendations on the big old ones versus the handheld small units? What do you think? Oh,
I used to have a big old analog and it died, and to fix it, I would have needed a scope. So I'm not in a rush to go buy another big big analog scope that probably will need work. And neither do I think the handheld small units are worth it, because they're still expensive, but they're more limited. I paid 200 something for the Rigol DS 1054 Z, I should say, for you guys, that I have. That and the S version I would look at. I think the difference is the S also has a signal generator built into it. It costs a little bit more. Brad turned me on to that, and it's been great for what I need to do with tube amps, because and it also solid state stuff. But I'm not, doing anything at the NASA level here. This is pretty simple stuff, and it's just reliable and it works every time. And it's kind of pretty in the background when I talk. I used to have the mic run to it, so it would.
I remember. I was going to bring that up.
Yeah,
that was very.
I could do it, but I'd have to do a splitter thing. That
was very mad scientist.
Well, I had such little
ghetto shit going on there, man.
I didn't have as good looking a setup then as I do now. In all modesty, I've really been building up the studio to look the part. But people have said, you don't use an O-scope. You don't know what you're doing. You don't use, I do use a scope. I just don't put it in the videos. It's too complicated to talk about most of the time. So it'd be like that thing dancing when I talk, that's a scope I don't have. And that talk died down. So
I agree. For the things that we do that you need a scope for, which is mostly troubleshooting. Right? Yeah. I use mine to trace a signal, simple old sine wave into the input, and be able to trace the signal through the amp looking for.
I don't even do that. I can trace a signal just by measuring voltages on plates and stuff and listen to the pops. I use it primarily for verifying the output wattage is what it claims to be, or especially on an amp with which I'm unfamiliar, in which case I'm like, it's supposed to be 30 watts. What's it putting out? It's putting out 22 watts. Something's off. Oh, it's putting out 31 watts. Okay, we're good, because I don't know what it should be. I don't have to use it on a deluxe reverb. I know what a deluxe reverb should be. And where's that thing that was just here? Somewhere floating. Oh, it's on the other side of the bench right now. I've got a Mark Bass little solid state combo with a problem. I use a scope for stuff like that, because for the very few things in that damn device where I can actually reach with probes, because everything's hidden away. But I can look at a tube amp and say, all right, first triode, second triode, plates, cathodes, blah, 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 I know what I'm looking at. Solid state SMD stuff, everything's everywhere. You have to have a scope to be able to follow the yellow brick road, so to speak.
Yeah, I don't touch any of that stuff.
Smart man.
But I use it.
So Brad can't say that I can't.
I use my scope. Yeah, I used my scope yesterday. So here's the most recent, use of it, and it was more like what you just said, checking the output stage. So I just finished building an altar on the bench, got it up and running. I'm doing voltage tests on it, checking it, and I fired the scope up and sent a sine wave into the effects loop return. Bypassed the preamp completely, and I wanted to see that the output was, at the speaker. Right, I'm running it into a resistive load, not onto a real speaker, but at the speaker jack is just a nice, true, completely balanced sine wave, and the output section's working beautifully.
I can do it here.
It's your generator. What do you use? That's an app, obviously.
Yes, but I've got a little adapter. Goes into this and takes me to a 1/4-inch plug, or nice. I can do it to a banana, or I can do it to just some crocodile clips, and then I can crocodile rock all night long. But yeah, I used to have a great big signal generator, 70s, 80s thing. It looked like an old cable TV box with a slider. Is my least favorite signal generator, but I never break strings on this one.
My scope's got one built in. It's pretty.
Yeah,
it's not,
I should have bought the S instead of the Z. That's what I was talking about earlier. The Z doesn't have that.
Yeah.
But rather than pay the extra couple $100, I paid $10 for an app, and it works really well.
Yeah, it looks good. Brett says, "Glad to see you text connecting and doing chats together." Yeah, look, I mean, we're just surprised that anyone's interested in us talking about this shit, to be honest.
Yeah, it's so strange. No one in our real lives, not that you guys aren't real, but I've never met most of you. People in real lives like, oh, that's great. I gotta go. If they say, what do you do? And you're like, I play guitar. Okay. Sometimes I play it really loud.
I think when I describe what I do now to people that are outside of this world, I can see the look in their eyes as they don't even know what a guitar amp is.
Yeah.
Right, to begin with, let alone how you might make one or repair one or whatever, right? So you got to actually start the conversation by saying, well, electric guitars, right? You plug them into, and kind of so rudimentary, right?
In our own quiet way, we make the world a louder place. Got two words for what I do. Plastics.
Yeah, I agree with this. Lyle's on fire. Yeah.
Man, this is why I usually chat in the afternoon. I'm not as caffeinated up yet. I don't have any of the responsibility of running the chat. This doesn't live on my channel.
You're just chilling, man.
I can say stupid things. It doesn't really reflect on me. So this is great.
Brad's been doing refits for the last 3 days. Yeah, I bet. I think that was maybe we were talking about having some variety. Do you work on guitars, Lyle?
Not to the level Brad does. I have the interest. I have the inclination. I have some of the experience. I don't happen to have the tools or the space, because you cannot do woodwork in the same place you do electronics work. My room is 15 by 20. And so all dust is bad. I can't have sawdust, I can't have bone dust, can't have rosewood dust in here. I would need a whole separate room. I need ventilation. I'd have to have all the tools, even just to do refrets and simple nut jobs. That's a couple $1,000s worth of tools I'd have to buy. I'd apprenticed at shops that had the tools, but you got to know your limitations. I do basic nut file stuff. I do polishing of minor imperfections on frets. I do intonation, truss rod, electronics, basic stuff. But if my guitar needs frets, if my guitar needs a nut, I take it to my buddy Bobby, who does it for real though. I would take it to Brad if I were in Australia. I love doing it. Well, I love doing aspects of it. I don't miss the polishing. As my December guest would say, polishing, polishing, polishing. But there's a little preview for you guys.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, there's so much of what we do in amps and guitar that people think, oh, we're just like doing rock star stuff, or wizard stuff. It's a lot of it's like, if you saw little hints of it in that Rusty Basement, it's like, okay, disconnect this, get a paper towel and some alcohol, clean up someone's fuck up, clean up an L7. It's a lot of it's like doing the dishes for a living.
Yeah.
Changing tires.
Yeah.
Only the tire can kill you at any moment if you're not paying attention. So we got that going for us.
That's the glamour right there, right? Is the the danger element that's always there. Murray says, I think we're talking about designs for future servicing. I'm not a pickup winder or a pickup guy, so I'd have to take your it's Ben, isn't it? Ben Murray's word on this one.
I've never taken apart a mini humbucker. I've taken apart many a PAF style full-size humbucker. But what do they do differently on the Les Paul Deluxe mini buckers? I would think they're similar. I mean, I know the Firebird's different, but anyway, yeah. Not everything can be a telly.
Yeah, this is it, man. The workhorse of the tally. Brett says, I would love to have a 2-channel amp that's plexi clean on one channel and hot rod plexi on channel 2 with an effects loop. Can it be done? Well, yes. I think there's a lot of
You've
amps.
already done it.
Yeah.
Just don't use the other channel. There you got your 2-channel amp.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, even there's quite a lot of stuff that you could. I mean, Dave's got amps like this.
Dave's got that. John's got that. But considering where we are, I think it's important to point out that Head First has that. Head First.
Yeah. Is that your Aussie accent there, man?
No, that was. I did a play where my character had an Australian accent. It took me 4 weeks to get there. Thick of the nasal cavities.
That's pretty good.
You have to live in it for a while. You can't. I especially can't do it from American, whatever the hell accent I have, back and forth. You have to warm up to it. But I think I went a little bit Ringo on you.
That's not bad. So speaking about accents, right? Accents do fascinate me. Is your accent regionalized in any way, Lyle? Like
only when I'm lazy. If I'm lazy, some Southernisms come out.
Okay.
Sometimes my I sounds turn into ah sounds, which drives me nuts. And there's nothing wrong with the Southern accent. But when I was younger, I had a stutter, and I did a lot of theater, which helped me get rid of the stutter. And it's interesting that what the trick was instead of saying what I needed to say, I imagined a little playwright in my head handing me what to say, because I was doing it in theater where I already had the words. I knew the words I needed to say. I never had a stutter on stage. In real life, I would stutter. And just that simple mental trick of saying, okay, here's what to say, then say it, as opposed to try to say it while you're writing it. It's just a mental construct, but it took away, not really reduced my stutter. And today, unless I'm trying to do a voiceover on a video and I needed to get it done in 10 minutes, I don't stutter. If I'm under time pressure, I got to edit out so much junk. But from theater and my background and seeing how the rest of the country, let alone the rest of the world, views people with Southern accents. This is before Clinton was president. We were always considered backwards. I know Australians have no idea what I'm talking about, or Kiwis. No one looks down on you guys for anything. But yeah, we were the backwater, or viewed as the backwater of America, and I was determined to be taken seriously. I was a very young, egocentric man. Not about looks or anything, just about, I wanted to be taken seriously. I thought I was going to do great things. Instead, I'm here on you guys on Wednesday night, which I love. But anyway, between the theater and I did not want to be limited. I developed whatever accent I have now, which comes from theater and NPR and doing a lot of reading a lot of Shakespeare without, I mean, I'm not going to do a BBC RP on you guys. That would be obnoxious. Only Madonna can get away with that bullshit. But, so I'm neutral. No one knows where I'm from. They just know I'm not from around there.
Yeah, right. Nice. Yeah. That's the way to be, man. That's the way to be.
Meanwhile, on BBC Two.
He's not from around here.
I have to make fun of myself. So you guys, I got to get a leg up on the rest of you.
Yeah. Leon's here. Hey, man.
Hey, Leon.
I think this is the first time I've seen you comment on one of my live streams, man. So I'm glad you're here. It's not too early in Perth, is it? What's the time there, man? It must be 9, quarter to 10. You'll be up. Right. Rosa Amp. So this is Rob. Rob says, it may have been discussed, I may have missed it. Can Lyle describe his background and education, the story behind how he got into amps? We did touch on this, didn't we, Lyle?
Yeah, I think we covered on that, and I talked about that in the tone talk I did with Dave, last year in November, and in various things. Grew up in a hyper-educated household. My parents each had multiple masters and doctorates, minister and attorney. They were both history and anthropology majors as well. And my grandmother did theater and knew everyone. And everyone, I have members of the family who all went into politics and high muckety mucks. And this was an expectation that one must succeed. And in order to do that, you have to read these things. You have to be interested in these things. The bar was very high. We didn't even have a television until I was like 11. And then I was just glued to the damn thing. It's like my parents in the 70s would not have any sugar in the house. And so of course, I go to somebody else's house and eat all the Cocoa Pebbles. Anything to avoid the carob hell that was my 70s household. But, there was an expectation that you wouldn't just read the chapters of Tom Sawyer in 4th grade. You would have read all of Huck Finn by 6th grade. You wouldn't just do that one little page handout of a scene from Romeo and Juliet. You would read Romeo and Juliet. You would discuss it at the dinner table.
Right.
That, every current event growing up was discussed, and it was discussed by people who were really invested and interested and informed. And I was expected to be able to participate, not at the level of the adults, but, things were explained to me. I remember, especially, I don't mean to go dark on everyone, but with all the awful things that are happening in Israel and Gaza right now, one of my earliest memories is having that kind of introduction to the fall of Vietnam, and then not that much longer, from my perspective as a child, to the hostage crisis in Iran. And so things were discussed. In order to join the discussion, you had to do your homework. Now they scale that for the kids, but by the time I was 12, I needed to watch the news. By the time I was 15, I needed to have read. It sounds egotistical, but it's just the background. I entered high school at a college level because of the family, not because of the education, not because of the schools. And that explains the pretentious lack of a regional accent as well, I suppose.
That's really interesting, man. This might be a personal question, but do you look back on that and think that you were lucky to be in that environment?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there were things about my family that weren't so great that I think anyone anywhere can say that. That's everyone's experience on this planet. If everyone is always happy all the time, you're missing something. TikTok. Yeah. But I'm not extolling or making some cartoon utopian vision of what my family was like. But there are things in that I had a background that not many people have. Certainly not in Jonesboro, Arkansas, than in Memphis, Tennessee had. Just an expectation that life was more than the day-to-day around us. And so first drop of the hat, I travel. And I don't travel to Vegas. I travel to places with museums. I don't go to the beach. I go to places with history because I want to experience all these places that I've come to know only through literature.
Yep.
God, we're way off amps. I also like loud things and bar chords and pinch harmonics.
You like drop D riffs. Yeah.
I do, because it's really easy to sound cool when you play drop D. It's like one finger's all I need.
All you need, man.
From Shakespeare
Mark,
to that.
yeah. We're back on track.
Ooh, Black Stars.
Yeah. I haven't, that's for sure. I don't know if you have
built really cheap. See my amps under $500 video if you want to know my view on Black Stars. For the build quality that you get, there's so many better choices. For the sound there's so many better choices. If you want a versatile amp that's going to be just as reliable, that costs less, look at like the Katana. If you want a versatile amp with tubes that's going to last longer, look at the Marshall DSL 40C and CR. Black Star, they sound kind of cool, but they don't last, and they keep having crippling issues that are easily avoidable if you're not building it to be disposable.
Yeah. This is like the guitar amp that's like an appliance. I'm not saying Black Star are that. I don't know anything about them, but I do know
when they work, they sound pretty damn good.
Yeah.
When they work.
But
the trouble is that's an asterisk.
Yeah. But this is the the domain where things are manufactured for just their lifespan, and then they get thrown away and you buy a new one.
I mean, Black Star does not do component level repair on their amps. If it's in warranty, they replace the entire board because it takes less time to do that than to figure out what individually is going wrong. Once it's out of warranty, when I put that first did a video on the Black Star HT Club 40, and I said, well, the trouble with doing this is they don't publish a schematic, and I know the problem's somewhere in this area around this op amp, but without the schematic, it would take me 2 hours to trace out what they're doing. And then it's SMD, which makes it complicated and people ignored the because. They're like, oh, he doesn't like SMD, he doesn't know how to work on SMD, he's not really qualified. No, if you're designing an amp with SMD, say that this piece of paper is the board.
Mm-hmm.
And you have SMD chips that are right there against the board. And then you have some radial filter caps over here. No problem. I can change out all the SMD stuff all day long. And later, if I need to change out the caps that are coming up off the board here. But if you design the board so the SMD stuff's right here and it's surrounded by rows of tall radial caps that are sticking up, you can't get in there with a meter to reach the SMD caps, let alone getting there with a hot air thing and some chip quick and whatever to change out a resistor or a diode or an op amp, because you're impeded from reaching that area because the caps placement. And so Black Star doesn't care because they just change out the board. And if it's out of warranty, sorry, kid. In order for me to fix that, I would have to A, trace out the circuit, B, remove all those caps to be able to access SMD stuff. But I could not then run the circuit unless I reinstall the caps from the rear, because I would, So I can do solid state, I can do tube, I can do through hole, I can do SMD, as long as the design was such that it was intended to be serviced. As soon as any aspect of that is compromised, I can still do it. Can you afford to have someone spend 4 hours on a $250 amp?
It's not worth it, is it?
No.
Hey, Chris.
Hey, Chris. I don't get a hi, Chris. Damn it. I thought you liked
Chris,
me.
I did watch your video on the Fender Princeton as well yesterday. So between yours and Lyle, I'm well covered. I'm sure Brad might have one too, man. I have to check that out. I'm sure he does.
I had a very nice phone call with Chris, I guess 3-4 weeks ago, Chris.
Oh, nice.
Very nice guy. Nice of him to reach out.
Yeah, he called me too, actually. It was cool. Nice chat. Now, I don't know, Lyle, whether you know this story. So where did everyone knows the Fender Boseman JTM 45 thing. Any insights as to the early Fender designs?
Oh, the RCA thing. It wasn't, the thing wasn't really, the claim is not that they're copying things from RCA, but from Western Electric, or just the tube guide. When tubes were introduced back in the day, a new tube hit the market. they would often have example circuits of how to use that tube because, hey, a new beam tetrode, you know, all these new things hitting the market. People have repeated variations on that claim that Fender's just copying this, Fender's just copying that. I also saw a video from a guy who's been doing this a lot longer than I have, who said he's heard all that. He knows every circuit Fender ever put out. He's never found an example where you could find that Fender circuit verbatim in any of the Western Electric stuff that was published in the 30s and 40s. That said, Leo came from a background of repairing radio, and radio would also involve rudimentary amplifiers of the time. So he'd seen other ways that these things have been implemented, and those people would have read the same resource books for the tubes. But way too much is made of that in any case, because you have a pentode or you have a triode. That's the first choice. What conditions does a pentode need to operate? What conditions does a triode need to operate? Once that criteria is met, what voltage are you working at? At that point, it all falls kind of the same. If you're to give Jason and me the same assignment and say, hey, I want a clean channel, it's going to use a 12AX7. The voltage available at that node is going to be 300 volts. You use whatever plate you want. You can use whatever coupling cap you want. You use whatever cathode and bypass cap you want, blah, blah, blah. But we want a nice clean sound with a big full frequency response. We're probably going to give you pretty much the same thing. Maybe he'd use 150K and I'd use 100K on the plate. Maybe I'd use a 4.7 microfarad. He'd use a 10 microfarad on the cathode. It's the same topology. You look at a Champ, you look at a Marshall, you look at a Soldano. It's the same triode circuit again and again and again and again and again. What's interesting are the things which couple them together. Dropping resistors, coupling cap values. Hey, this one doesn't have a bypass cap. What does that do to the sound? Hey, why does this Soldano have a 39K there? That seems like a weird value. You learn this stuff. But there's basically the output stuff, and there's the input stuff, the preamp stuff, and then you can have you spin the wheel of which 3 or 4 phase inverters do you use, or do you go crazy and use a cathode follower for the output tubes, a la steel string swinger or SVT, in which case Dumble just literally cut half of an SVT and put a Voxy preamp on it and said, hey, here's a new Dumble, literally physically the output section of an SVT. There are no new ideas in this. I hinted at this when Dave and I did last week. You know, everything we're doing still pretty much has its roots in 1958.
Oh yeah. But
how well, you know, we're all pulling rabbits from a hat. How well are we doing it? You know, that's the difference.
And it's a subjective thing too, right? This is like I'm not saying we're chefs or anything like that, but it is people have
yourself.
You have
I didn't get that by accident.
Yeah. You didn't. They are like, it's a recipe, and you know, and how much salt do you want? How much pepper? How much spice? Whatever, right? It's like,
right.
It's you know. There's no right or wrong answer. Just depend. You know, it's like what are you looking for, and what's the kind of end result that you're searching for? Is it something that you want to play? Are you designing something that you're imagining a player or a player has requested from you? You know, it's kind of
it's tricky. You know, on the RevStar video the other day, which is not a major accomplishment, but a lot of people seem to be responding to it. I pointed out that, hey, positions 2 and 4 and the boost thing, I find pretty much unusable and gimmicky, and the pro players who've been over here did not like it at all. But if you like it, that's fine. I've had people be rude to me about that, saying, "Oh, you don't know what you're talking about. The guitar's perfect. Yeah, you're an idiot." Blah 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 blah. I'm like, first of all, I'm sorry I wasted your time with a 13-minute free video that you're under no pressure to watch. Second of all, I said it was a subjective choice. It's a free country. You're free to be an idiot, and I'm glad to see you're exercising your option. Go you!
I love that.
Away from me.
That's cool. The Axe Forever says, I just got to watch Dave with Lyle. Yeah, I've watched that too. That was cool. Now we have Jason and Lyle. Yeah, we're just sharing the love around, man.
If the three of us ever get together, we'll form one giant mega tech, a 50-foot robot tech who will take on a Mason.
It'll probably happen, you know. Yeah, Brad's used a few of the Loop PCBs, man.
You ever watch Voltron?
Voltron? No.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a generational difference or geographic, where the five small people would combine to form the giant robot lion thing.
Okay.
Actually, it's five smaller robot lions with people piloting them that combined to form one giant. Anyway,
kind of rings a bell.
It was a long ass time ago.
Yeah. Yeah, Brad's saying, so Merlin's books, I've got a couple of his books. I've got the designing, that one there, designing tube preamps, and I've got the power supply one as well. I think both awesome references.
Yeah, everything Merlin has written that I've read has been fantastic. Merlin and Aiken amps are just fantastic resources. Aiken's writing at a deeper technical level, but I mean, not that Merlin doesn't know what he's talking about. I think Merlin's a little bit better at translating for the rest of us, but both of them are just phenomenal.
Agree. PS says, Jason, some of the best medium to high gain amps I've heard have been your mods. Thanks, man. What's the mod for gain increase that has most bang for buck on a 2204? Thanks, gentlemen. We talked about this last week with Dave as well, actually, and the single thing you can do to a 2204 for the most bang for buck is to play with the second cathode, the 10K, the cold clipper, as everyone calls it. So the second gain stage.
Part of this chat too.
Yeah. You can parallel in a resistor on top of that to change that 10K cathode down to 4K7, 2K7 or whatever, and you can put a bypass. Be
careful if you go below 4K7. Below that, you can get oscillation. There's some other tricks you have to do.
This is it. Yeah, you start to have to then, if you have two gain stages like that, because the first gain stage is a 100K plate with a 2K7 0.68 bypass. And then if you do that same thing for the second gain stage and one's cascading into the next, you're then into the territory of having to manage the gain, because you've got enough there that the thing can oscillate and do all kinds of crazy things.
I would suggest, and I'm not trying to interrupt, and I think Jace would probably agree, that once you start down this path of seeing how much gain you can get away with in a 2203, 2204, you're quickly going to learn all kinds of things that you did not know before about oscillation and grounding and heater supplies and shielding and what a shunt capacitor is, say from plate to cathode, which is going to have a much better, different behavior than grid to ground, because plate to cathode won't roll off as much when you roll your guitar down. There's so much more to learn once you go down that path, and unless you really know what you're doing, you can end up with an oscillating mess. So if you are an aspiring tech and it is your amp, go for it, but change one thing at a time. Listen to what happens. Be ready to change more things to offset the things you just did. For the rest of you that just want more gain out of your 2204, overdrive pedals.
Yeah, there's always that. There's always that.
Which is what a lot of your heroes did back in the day.
They did.
OD2, SD1 into a 2204. There you go.
Yeah, I think a lot of us, and because this is kind of my learning ground as well, right? A lot of us tinker with this stuff not because it's the easiest thing to do, but we just like to do it
because it's there.
Because it's there.
Yeah.
You will get, you do get different characteristics.
You are a Kiwi.
Yeah. I know. That's a reference to Sir Edmund Hillary, isn't it? Well done, man. Very nice. If anyone doesn't know who Sir Edmund Hillary is, he's the first man. Well, not the first. He was with a party of them. But
he and Norgit Tensa, is that his name?
Tenzing.
Yes.
Reached the top of Everest.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was a famous Kiwi. So yeah, look, I would look. If you want to get into tinkering and you've got some smarts about you, and you're not gonna. We've already talked about this, right? In terms of how to get into into the tube amp world. Build some pedals, do a champ, whatever. But playing around with the 2204, and as Lyle said, right, you'll start to generate more gain, but that in turn will then there's no free lunches, right? You'll then have to then adjust other things, but you will learn a lot, and you'll probably have some fun along the way, which is what it's all about. Of course.
I would interject that if you do try this, one of the things you have to know is that the noise level and the squeals and the oscillations, you can have a terrible sounding amp when it's sitting on your bench and the chassis facing up and just open. You put a metal shield over the entire thing, a lot of those problems go away. You have to remember that it's going to be hopefully shielded when it's in the cabinet. That said, I always test to see what the noise level, how far down the noise level goes when it goes down when you have it shielded. But as far as oscillation, I'm not content to say, oh, that oscillation will go away if it's shielded. I make sure it does not oscillate before it's shielded. As far as the stuff in the background, I know it'll be even better shielded. But always test with a big piece of metal first, without electrocuting yourself or dropping it somewhere.
Yeah. It's actually one of the things I have right next to my bench. Sheet of metal. It's so that's the one, man. Oh, that's the back. That's the back off a JCM 800.
Yep, and it works great.
All you need. All you need, man. Analog.
Watch this. It's like Marshalls and Fenders were made for each other. And that's one of the ways I test.
Who says they can't play together nicely?
Right.
Yeah. Who says that? Analog Blue says, he's in the market for a decent Variac. I've been told to stay away from the ones made in China. What do you recommend that's not too expensive? Any ideas there, Lyle?
I've had the Chinese ones that you get from partsexpress.com, and I have not had any issues, but it's only been like 10. Brad says he's run into a bunch of problems. I would go with Brad. I'm sure he's dealt with more of them. I'm lucky enough to have it's behind it. The cable's under it. I have this old prop from a James Whale movie myself.
Ooh, look at that.
If there is a version of this being made today, I don't think I could afford it. So, it depends on where you live. You can always hit Hamfest things, ham radio trade group things and flea markets and stuff, and keep your fingers crossed, because that stuff from the 40s and 50s and 60s is so well made. You have to make sure it works. But a lot of those guys who do the Hamfest thing, they're in their 70s and 80s. So sadly, estate sales are going to be a thing. Or you can go pay an awful lot for a really good one at DigiKey or Mauser.
Yeah. I've got one on my bench. I use it a lot. It's just a Chinese one. It's not expensive, but I'm not using it like, if we're all Eddie Van Halen and we're using the Variac to play live or whatever, then yeah, maybe I'd spend a lot more money on one because I want it to be super reliable. But I use it to bring amps up, and I don't run it with, like, if I'm doing some serious output testing into a resistive load, I'm probably not using the Variac at that point. So I
use it to bring things up when testing, and that's only on old amps. On new amps, I don't worry about it. And I use it because our wall voltage in Memphis changes so radically between 109 and 130, depending on the time of year and the time of day. So sometimes I'll use it just to say, all right, well, I got 112 coming out of the wall. I need to set the bias, brings up to 120. But it's only a 5-amp Variac, so I'm not using it on SVTs. And I've used it in the past in conjunction with a step-up transformer when I've had a 240 volt country amp where I need to say, all right, they're according to this, they're usually running about 245. Let me test it at 245 because I have to be able to nudge it beyond what the step-up will do.
Well, I use mine for 120. So for alters that I sell into the US, which is 5 out of 6 shipping to the US.
Yeah.
I build and test the amp here at 120, right, with a Variac, and then I just got to remember, make sure I separate the 120s from the 240s.
Oh yeah.
Ask me how I know.
And fuse appropriately.
It's the mistake you only make once.
Yeah.
Well,
it's fine if you have the 240 sent to the United States with a 1-amp fuse. The fuse will just blow instantly before anything else goes wrong. Vice versa, not so much.
Yeah, this is it. Here's a cool question from Clyde. It says, what is the coolest amp you have worked on this year? You first, Lyle. I already know what mine is.
I think mine would probably have to be that Rusty Bassman.
That was cool.
I mean, it sounds so damn good. The owner picked it up tonight. He's using it for a studio session. He's going to bring it back for me to do the final master volume install, and you're going to get to hear him play it. He's a really good rock player. I'll probably get some other guys to do some of the clean stuff because I don't think Scott spends too much time in clean world. It's a great sounding amp, and it's an amp that I wasn't sure could be an amplifier again. So I'm really proud of myself. But you know,
it should be. It came out great. Is this the one that you said earlier? You were saying it kind of hangs with the Bogners and the Friedmans and all this stuff.
Yeah. Well, I've got 3 67 Bassmen here at the same time for whatever reason. Thank you, gods. All 3 of them are going to hang with all those things. But this one, on one of them, I'm doing a different voicing on the bass channel. One of them, I'm restoring the bass channel because it has original parts. And on this one, the Rusty one, Scott used to play Bogner Shivas, so I voiced it to be very familiar to him. So all 3 are going to have massive quantities of gain. All of them are going to have the same normal channel, but the bass channel is going to be slightly different on each. That's the fun thing about this is you can say, hey, what kind of amp do I want to do today? So one of them's a little more better than Bogner. One of them's going to be a little bit train wrecky, and one of them's going to be stock Bassman. AB 165 A864 hybrid Bassman. So,
okay.
What about you?
For me, it would have to be the 1967 JTM 45.
Yeah,
that I did some restoration work on, and it was this amp was a transitional amp in that it had a factory EL34s, the 50 watt output transformer. But
was it the Black Flag series?
It was branded as It was branded as JMP, but it had pretty much stock JTM 45 front end, and it was the guy that owns it. He's a collector, right? He's got a nice vintage collection, and he knew this amp pretty well, as you'd expect, right? So when he came over and we chatted about it, he'd already done some research on it and pointed me to a few different resources on the internet. George Metropolis featured the same, not the same amp, but obviously it's an amp from the exact same period that he worked on. It wasn't George's amp, but he featured it in the video because it was, it was notable.
Probably only a few dozen of that version ever made, and how many of them are even still out there now? That's the thing. Do you know the 67 Marshalls? Like, I've seen a bunch of different 67 Marshalls. It's not like there was a model out that year. It's just like, hey, these are the parts they could get. This is the idea that they're trying as they transition from the JTM 45 to the 50, eventually to what I guess people think of as the Monterey amp, which became the lead, the super lead. So many experiments.
Yeah. So this was it was tube rectified on factory, even though one of the mods that had happened to it had been converted to solid state, right? So that was one of the. I saw
that video. It's just been a while. I've forgotten the particulars, other than I was jealous that it came into you.
Yeah. This was I
like, get enough nice ones, I guess.
Yeah, well, this was like I remember that amp, so well, right? Because I remember it on the bench and thinking, "Oh my god, like someone's trusting you with this."
Yeah, right.
It's
like some of things for grown-ups.
Yeah,
so strange.
This is it, right? Scott says that you speak standard American broadcast English. There you go.
Yeah, people keep saying I should go into radio. I don't think people are aware how much radio is dying and getting corporate, and all the voiceover work is increasingly getting done by creepy robot voices or Morgan Freeman. So I don't think I can compete with God or creepy robots.
Brad says he bets you turn Southerners frig when you're down at the corner store.
And actually, no. If I'm at the corner store or whatever, this voice implies power and authority. If I'm trying to get a deal on something, I want to buddy up to someone. Thanks a lot. Hey man, how's it going? I want to talk to you about this here. What's the best fridge you selling this year? There's all that shit. Hey, I'm just like you. And
I could see, man. I could see why you're on stage, man. I could see why your theater background you've made for the.
oh, my theater background. Ooh, I didn't know we were going to speaking like that. Okay, theater.
Whatever Lyle's accent is, I want it. Jason and Lyles are some of the most therapeutic in the guitar community. It's a very small community, man.
I'm using it. They've come for your liver.
All right, we're gonna get back on track here for a second. Kimball says, "Hi guys, is there anything I can do to help my Origin 50? I mainly used it for a pedal platform."
Yeah. Keep the mastered volume as high as possible. And if that means you keep the preamp down, that's fine. That shift thing, find where it won't get fizzy with your pedals. So just turn the master all the way up. Turn the preamp up just until you're loud enough. You're going to be clean. That's fine. Turn the shift so your overdrive pedals don't get fizzy. Set everything so it sounds good and enjoy playing it. But with the 50 and the 100, there are some 2-watt resistors in the power section, which have more than 2 watts dissipation across them. So don't be surprised if and when it will need service. If the tech's good, it's a 30-cent resistor that can be spotted because it's burnt. The schematic's available. That would be a 20-minute fix for most of us. So it's not like it's doom and gloom. It's just, why didn't they use a 3-watt resistor? It costs a few cents more.
Yep. I've found, like with the stock amp, I think it sounds way better in the lower gain. You know, they've got the push-pull pot on that gain. Yeah. The lower gain mode sounds way better.
I bought my kid a Katana 50. He wanted to get into guitar. He loves Metallica. He loves real metal things I can't really listen to, but I pretend to for his sake. And I wasn't sure if he was going to really take to guitar or anything. He bought the Katana. I played the Katana. I can get some really good sounds out of it. Would I trade in any of these Fenders here for it? No. But up against the Origin, I think it makes an awful lot of sense. And if it fails, it's a $300 amp, not an $800 amp. Or I think the Origins are going most places new for $700. More sounds, cleaner. Neither one's that reliable, but you know, $250, $300. It's hard to argue with that.
Probably lighter as well.
Oh yeah, real light. And for the benefit of everyone else in the family, as my son tries to learn how to play Metallica and System of a Down and everything, headphones. He can listen on headphones. We don't have to hear it.
We love that. Here's an interesting question that I've never seen asked before. Danny says, is there a technical reason that DC coupled cathode followers, okay, are in the same bottle as the preceding stage, such as, you know, like V2 in an 800, or is it a matter of convenience?
I've seen it split. I've seen it separated, but mostly it's convenience.
Yeah, agree. Yeah, I think you can two triodes and a 12AX7. You can think of them as completely independent things.
Yeah, in theory they are. Not always, depending on how the cathode, how the filament of the heater and how the cathode are actually physically done. But in theory, they're supposed to be totally separate.
Yeah,
and some are tongue salts or electroharmonics yellows. By the way, if you're buying electroharmonics preamp tubes, the silver labeled ones that say 7025 tend to be pretty good. The yellow labeled ones that just say 12AX7, no. They might be working the day that you buy them, but
hey Lyle, the season is around the corner. We want another video on how to make one of your minced meat pie. I didn't know you did videos on meat pies.
Once or twice a year I'll do a cooking video. I've already done a video on mincemeat. Watch that one again if you want mincemeat. I'll do some other recipes, but mincemeat has been done.
Well, there you go.
I thought about doing one the other day. I was making from scratch spaghetti and meatballs.
Okay.
But I didn't want to bring my good camera in the kitchen where the oil was spattering, and I didn't have the tripod handy that my phone goes on too. So you did not get the spaghetti and meatballs recipe. Sorry.
I'm gonna have to check these videos out, aren't I?
Hey, you should start making some cornbread. You can revolutionize cooking in Melbourne.
Okay. Well, yeah. Well, no one's doing that here. That's for sure. I should check it out.
It's delicious. You must. There's not. I find a lot of similarities between the Australians I know and the Southerners I know. So,
okay.
Yeah. I mean, we're all full of coming from Scots, Irish immigrants to some degree. It's just that mine had better prison records.
Well, my ancestors they immigrated to New Zealand, so I think I escaped the. We didn't steal loaves of bread and get shipped off to Australia. Yeah. Maybe we did. I don't know. Okay, I think this is a conversation.
He was asking about the LP. I was asking about the mini humbuckers. So the leg threads are drilled out. Oh yeah, that's effed. Well, I'm glad I don't have to work on those. Sorry, Murray.
We've got Kyle here. Hey, Kyle, how you doing, man? Drop D chords took me to Europe, man. So
one of the few Kyles I like because he watches my channel.
Yeah. I know where you're coming from on that. Well, the K and the L are right next to each other on the keyboard, man.
So what? I don't call you Kaysen. I don't call you Hasten. I don't call you Uason. I don't call you Mason. I could. I don't call you Nason. Those are all surrounding the J. I can even go to Yason, Eason, in which case I'm sounding like I'm doing Greek. So, look, we got Lyle, the crocodile, Lyle Lovett, me, Lyle Wagner from Wonder Woman.
Okay.
And Lyle Alzado, whom I'm told is famous. So
I've got all the bases covered. So Kyle actually messaged me this morning and is going to attempt a mod on I think you said an SC20, the 800 Studio Series, which is back to what we said before, right? Someone asked about what are the easy mods you can make to a 2204.
Yeah.
That's where you go. Gee, where else we got here?
Murray Guitar Pickups is saying, South Australia was a free state. I do apologize in advance. I am not well-versed in Australian or New Zealand history. I'm willing to learn, but I know that the concept of Australia with debtors and et cetera is much like the concept of Georgia here in the States. So I'm not exactly throwing stones at glass houses here.
Yeah, it's all good. I'm sure it's all done. I'm not sure where that comment is. I can't find it. Probably later.
You'll get there. That's like 30 minutes ahead of where you're at now.
Yeah, we've got to. I'll try and get through these. Where are we at? 2 hours 20 nearly. You want to go a little bit longer, man?
Hey, I can do another. I can go the full distance if I can go take a leak first.
Yeah, well, why don't you do that if you like, and then we'll try and get 2:30. So we'll go another 15. How does that sound?
We can go another 30 as soon as I come back. Whatever you want to do, 15:30.
All right.
I'm here anyway.
Yeah. Well, I'm here. That's for sure. Yeah, the Axe Forever. Yeah, the stereotone chopper. So that's it's kind of a version of a Cameron style Jose pre-tone stack diode clipping amp. Nick is a great guy. I've had a lot to do with Nick over a long period of time. He's awesome. Really, really super nice guy. Always ready to help. And his stuff is obviously really well built. I think everyone knows that. We want an Alta 100, man. I'd love to help you out with that. Yeah, Scott, I miss when datasheets had example circuits. Yeah, look, I had some of them still do. I don't know if that's look, I remember the last useful example circuit I got from a datasheet was for an LM, 7800 series voltage regulator. And if you look up the data sheet for those, the Fairchild one or whatever, they've got like 10 or a dozen different example circuits of how you can use a regulator in different scenarios. So, still useful stuff out there, I think. Chris says, you're off. I would never ignore you. I don't know.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate that.
Where are we at here, man? I'm just
the downside of all the coffee.
This is it. Clyde says, I'm not sure what that is. Is that Kyle or Lyle? Learning about build quality is extremely important. Yeah, for sure. So Chris says you got the red J-car Variac. I think I might have the same one, man. And I did. I also
think it's the same thing sold here as Parts Express. Probably the same factory in China selling the red thing to different people to relabel it. From what I find, as long as you're not stressing the current draw on it, and you calibrate the damn knob. So if it's set it to 120, turn it till you get 120 volts, and then loosen the set screw, and then turn it so the 120 lines up with the line, then tighten it again. It's usually okay. But Brad says he's had a lot of failures with it, and so ask him, because I have not, but I'm inclined to believe Brad on this kind of thing.
I think the key is not to stress them too much. Like don't try and pull 6 amps of current through it or something like that, because they'll vibrate and they'll make a terrible noise, and it's a bit scary. So just go gentle on them. I think use them to regulate your voltage rather than try and pull too much current through it. And I did that same little mod, Chris, which is put the digital current meter on it. It's a pretty useful addition to those basic Variacs for sure. David wants to know what kind of coffee you drink, man.
Well, most of the time it's Maxwell House French roast with the Braun coffee maker set to bold and hot. But there was a client dropped off 2 bags of coffee as a gift because he was pleased with the work I'd done, and it was French Truck, which is a brand out of New Orleans. And one of them I thought was absolutely horrible, but the other one, the Commander's Palace mix with chicory, was absolutely delightful. It was like dark chocolate and burnt sugar in the background, and I'm going to be getting a whole bunch more of that. It wasn't sweet; it was just that burnt sugar, dark chocolate sensation. So I'm afraid that that well-meant gift of the 1 bag of French Truck coffee means I'll have to start spending a lot more on coffee, because damn, it was good.
It is. Right?
Of all the other things available in American supermarkets, I found that the Maxwell House French roast is the closest to what I'm looking for.
I think once you experience good coffee, you can't go back, right?
Well, Brad would say that I still haven't, but I've had it in Florence, I've had it in Lisbon, I've had it in New York, I've had it in Paris, and I prefer good drip coffee to espresso. So.
Well, this is it. We were chatting about this before we came on air, right? We were talking about coffee almost straight away. It's a thing in the US. I mean, I was there again this year, and I had to readjust my coffee sensor back into we're having filter coffee now, which is, it's not that I dislike it. It's just different.
It is different, and it's not always done well. But if it is done well, it's a good thing. It's a different good thing. The thing I don't like about espresso is that it's a little bit, it's like shots. I don't want to take a shot of whiskey. I want to enjoy the drink. I prefer beer or wine to whiskey, but I don't like the rushed thing with espresso. And I'm talking real espresso, little espresso, little macchiatos.
Your short black.
I'm not talking about a big cappuccino, because that seems to be a perversion coming back across the pond from America in terms of big cups full of steamy milk. But a traditional thing is just you stand at the counter and you get your shot and you drink it and you go, and that's fine. But I enjoy the long process of enjoying a cup of coffee and reading the newspaper, and that's what I'm doing. I'm doing this. This is its own reward in a sense. It's a process. It's a ritual. I don't go to Starbucks because it all tastes bad. I've had good espresso and bad espresso. I will say that if you find yourself in Paris, if any cup that says Café Richard is crap, Café Richard is French for Cisco. It is the worst stuff. It's if the school cafeteria made espresso, that's what it would taste like. But there is good coffee in Paris. It's just harder to find. Espresso and drip.
What do you think of this? And I noticed this in the US when I was there. I think maybe it's less prevalent here. I'm not sure, but it was a massive shift to iced coffee. Like everyone's drinking their coffee ice cold.
Well, I've grown up in the American South, so iced coffee and iced tea are not new here. In fact, they are survival strategies. You have I keep making Australian references. We've been there 20 years. I'll continue that. Like, Midnight Oil song, where it's Western Desert lips and breeze at 45 degrees.
Yeah.
Once I did the conversion, like, oh yeah, it's August here. So yeah, I don't want steaming hot coffee when it's 98 degrees in the shade on my front porch. That's when iced coffee is wonderful. Iced coffee, if it's not really hot outside, I don't want it.
Yeah. Makes sense, man.
Especially if it's got like 8 shots of vanilla and caramel and garbage.
Yeah, all that crap. Yeah, this is it, man.
This is not a dessert. This can accompany a dessert. It's a very different thing.
Brad wants more cooking.
This is a fat man telling you it should not be a dessert. It does not need to have 8 grams of sugar in it.
All right. Leon wants to know, respectively for either of us, what's the worst looking internals of an amp you've worked on?
Jason, did you degoop a Cameron? Was it a Cameron or was it a mod?
It was a Cameron. It was a Cameron. And it had been degooped, thankfully. So it had been gooped heavily, and somewhere in its life it had been mostly degooped. It was a late 70s JMP. That
I loathe, I detest, I despise, and I disdain goopers. And I'm including Mr. Dumble in that. It's such an egotistical bullshit thing to do, to say, this will never, ever need work. I put all these things in here that have a lifespan, but you can't change them out without knocking $30,000 off the value of this glorified Fender clone. It's insane to me.
It's ridiculous. I think on this channel a few weeks ago, I described it as like it's like taking your car to a mechanic who could hot rod your engine, getting it back, and then you pop the hood and have a look, and you see that he's encased the entire engine in black resin so that the engine could never, ever be worked on or serviced ever again.
Well, here's full circle. I've got one of your Kiwi brethren who did that. I've got a Crowther hotcake here.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
Where the owner plugged it into 18 volts by mistake, and it blew out one or more 16-volt caps in the pedal. But Mr. Crowther gooped it with epoxy.
Oh, man.
So guess what I can't do without costing the owner much more than the cost of a new Crowther hotcake. And if you see this, Mr. Crowther, it was a good sounding pedal. I had no interest in copying it or cloning it. If I did, the goop wouldn't stop me. I could still do it. Yeah. But it means that instead of putting in 3 new 30-cent capacitors, it's toast. So who won here? Not the owner.
I don't get it. I mean, because if you want to reverse engineer a circuit, you will, and even scratching out. So I see a lot of stuff where even like cap values have been scratched out or put a Sharpie on it or whatever. It's like, really? I mean, okay, if I really want to measure that thing, I'll just measure it. I don't need to read it. I just don't get it. I've never understood it.
As far as the worst internals I've worked on, I don't want to do a shots fired thing, but I'm back in the Facebook days. I had a D-Labs come in, and that thing should never have been sold. Look on the Facebook Psionic audio page and search for the D-Lab, and you'll see what I'm talking about. So I was very shockingly surprised by that, how unprofessional it was, unsafe it was, and how it should never ever have been sold to a human.
Yeah. 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 So Leon, definitely that Cameron is probably I was surprised that it even worked, to be honest. Like,
I've seen some horrible mods in my life.
I've
only heard Camerons online and seen pictures of them. Never had one on the bench. So
it sounded, I mean, it's a lot of gain, right? And it sounded pretty good, actually. But I couldn't help be struck by the feeling that there were twice as many components in the SAM to deliver that tone than there needed to be.
Mm-hmm.
Just so over the top and like complex.
Well, without it might have been that the goop was given the whole structure some support that it had to have. In which case, sometimes it's better just to build it out from scratch than to put London Bridge in little chunks on an existing one.
I said this in the video that I did on the SAM. I said literally, because it was almost like not a live unboxing, right? But I flipped that amp over and put the camera on because I just wanted to kind of like try and get a reaction to it. And I was literally speechless, but I just said, at this point, you just build a new amp. What are you doing? Like,
I know the flip side of that, people say, hey, can you do one of those Filmo sound conversions for me? No, lots of guys will. I won't. If you want an amp that sounds like that, I will order all the stuff and build you a good 583 variant, because that's what it's going to end up being. But then I have a chassis where everything fits, and I have control over the signal flow. I can keep all the stuff in one triode here and all the stuff in the other triode here, and wires aren't crossed, and everything has mechanical support, and I can choose the iron, and I can make choices as a designer, not just satisfy some kitschy urge that people have.
That's 100%. Yeah, Leon's in the Kyle Bill camp here. Drop tunings have enabled a lot of travel for me. Yeah, and you're in like, what are you, Leon? Drop C or something? You're way down there. You're way down there. What else have we got here, man? Yeah, Troy, drop T took Leon to Oklahoma. There you go.
So it's drop T's fault. My apologies to everyone in Oklahoma. You're okay.
Not a place I've been to yet. I'm just going through the chat here, guys, trying to find something else.
Is there an opposite of a bucket list? Look, I've seen lots of photos and videos of emu planes. Brad does not live that far from Oklahoma already, so.
Well, we've seen, because we get to experience it when Brad takes us on his bushwalks.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think you did. Brad? Did you start a separate channel for your bushwalks, or are you putting them on your main channel now? I'm not sure. James, yes, I did see your question, and I apologize. I missed it, and I can't remember what it was. I think your question was maybe similar to one we already answered, which was, what are the easiest mods you can make to a 2204? I think you can ask it again, man. Because I can't go back in the chat now. It's too.
Yeah, copy and paste it.
Yeah, put it in.
It's harder than people think to keep up with this stuff. I missed a super chat in my thing Saturday. I felt terrible. I found it later and put it in the comments, and they answered it in the comments and pinned it, but I don't know if the guy saw it. And you want to be polite to everyone. You want to answer everything you can, but we're juggling plates when we do this thing.
I know, because obviously everyone can see the chat, and they know that it's also used as a mechanism whereby the people watching the stream communicate with each other. So trying to filter through this and trying to answer legit questions can be challenging, because there's always nice statements like this. Yeah. Yeah, it's super. It's cool and useful.
He's biased, though.
Yeah. Now, Brad, we agree on this, man. Melbourne has a coffee culture for sure.
Well, then I need to visit you.
It defines the city. Oh, bullshit. Perth is better. Oh, come on, man. I'll let you have that one. Maybe it is. Oh yeah, right. You guys don't even call this. So Troy and Leon are on the other side of Australia, right? Perth, which for anyone who doesn't
all the way
know,
in the west.
it is in the middle of freaking nowhere, but it's somewhere where you guys are. I'll give you that. And you know what, like Brad and I, right? So Brad's in Sydney, I'm in Melbourne. They call it over east. Listen to them. Over east, like a different planet.
Well, it is a long way away.
It is a long way away. It's a 5-hour flight to Perth from here.
It's like Texas.
3-day drive or something. It's a long way, man. Yeah. Chris is saying we're obviously getting into the coffee here now. Everyone's run out of AMP questions. They're talking about coffee.
Well, coffee is near and dear to most of our hearts. Red beans and rice for life, Leon says. Maybe I'll do a red beans and rice recipe for those of you who were not lucky enough to grow up this close to Louisiana.
Yeah, I'd like to see that. You should. These cooking videos sound popular, man. You could you might find that it overtakes your AMP channel. You never know.
It'd be great, except I'd have to. It's one thing if I say, "Here's your AMP back," I can't. I'd have to eat everything. But no, I think relatively few people like them, but the ones who like them really like them. So everyone who's tried the recipes has really, really liked them.
Well, but,
culturally, Memphis and New Orleans are kind of sister cities in a lot of ways. And
it's a much
we have
better
the same cooking traditions,
right? Well, the audience that you're appealing to is far greater than AMP nerds, right? It's one thing.
Well, I think only the AMP nerds get to see the cooking videos typically. Maybe that'll change. But the way I see it is like, if I were watching a guy in Denmark and he showed me the best way to pickle herring, and I've never had pickled herring because I'm not in Denmark, on rye bread changes everything. I'd want to know that. Oh, and here's how to make it here. I could have a taste in Norway. I could have if someone else in Zimbabwe. I mean, that's the great thing about the internet. And so I put a Southern cornbread recipe up without sugar. And that means that someone in Scotland can try it. Someone in Australia could try it. Someone in Israel could try it because the ingredients are simple, but just people talk about Southern American cooking, not South American cooking, though that's great as well. But the southern parts of the United States, our cooking is known across the world, but you often get real bad imitations of it. KFC is not Southern fried chicken.
Yeah.
The barbecue restaurants in LA or New York, let alone London or Paris, are not barbecue, not Southern barbecue. So here's how to really do it. I'm not saying it's the only way, but it's an authentic way. So how do you like your toads? I hear that's big where you are.
That's north. That's for the Queenslanders.
In Arkansas, they lick them.
Yeah. No, we're all.
I could take you to Toad Lick.
We're pretty safe down here, man. I think Melbourne's too cold for most of the things in Australia that kill you. They're all up north. All the dangerous stuff. All the weird and wonderful wildlife.
And all the film crews.
Yeah, this is it. Yeah, Brad, you do have a second channel for silly stuff. Yeah, so you don't have silly stuff on your first channel? Come on.
Was doom and whiskey the other day.
Yeah. Okay. Here's James's question. Might be the last serious question we get on this stream.
Oh, we've had serious ones?
Might be the first serious question we get on the stream. The question is what to look out for. So James asks, what to look out for when adding an extra gain stage in a 2204 around things like oscillation and so on. Yeah.
Well, I did that before. You want to have very good shielding from the input to the grid on both on V1A and B and V2A. Sometimes it's V2B, depending on how the tube is laid out. I don't recommend most people shield to the plate, though some people do, but for most people learning, shielding to ground is much better. A telescope shield only connected at one end. In theory, it's better to be at the receiving end, but in practice, it doesn't make that much difference inside a chassis. It's short links. You may want to experiment with some caps to ground, maybe 10 picofarad off the input to sleeve on the input jack, maybe 100 picofarad from plate to cathode on the tube socket. They're not always necessary. Big, heavy things like 500 picofarad across 100K plate, those are big things that are more tone shaping. But just keeping oscillation down and hiss down off the input, sometimes moving the grid stopper directly, usually moving it directly to the grid on the tube versus having it on the board. A lot of times I'll leave those 68Ks on the board, and I'll disconnect the wires from the jack to the board and the board to the input, and I replace all that shielded wire straight to a 68K right at the grid as physically close as I can get it without overheating the resistor body when soldering the lead. Where the wire is routed in a, let's see if I can show this. All right, this circle formed by this wire is a tube socket, and that's the closest thing I got right now, without spilling my coffee for you. So which way? All right. So if this is pin 9 on the tube, has a black loop that goes like this, and then pin 4 and 5 has a red which goes like this. And a lot of times they'll have a grid wire run like this to the grid of the tube, but pin 9, that black wire, is going like this. So you're actually running your grid signal in parallel to and very close to that heater's connection to going to pin 9. So I will disconnect typically the green wire going to the grid, and instead of running it like this, which is in parallel and close to that black heater, I'll run it like this and then over the tube and down the middle to the grid. So it's farthest from pin 9, farthest from pin 4 and 5. And so if you look at one of my apps, you'll see green wires going like this and approaching from the side over the tube. That dramatically lowers all the bzzz stuff in the background on most Marshalls. Really, I mean, people talk about, oh, you got to twist all the heaters. If you do this, you don't really have to tightly twist the heaters because you're dressing the AC signal on the grids farther away from that. In general, things which carry AC only, like your grids, which should only be AC, are much more subject to picking up noise from the environment than DC. So if you have a plate, you have a cathode, there's a signal there, especially if your AC is riding a 200 volt DC thing, you only have to worry about noise on that after the subsequent coupling cap where it blocks out the DC, goes back to AC. So your AC stuff for audio should all be shielded or routed very carefully. Your DC stuff, you can get away with more things, but you can't get away with everything. If you have a plate running parallel with a heater, you can still pick up noise on that. So I have little plastic chopsticks you'll see me use in my videos where I'll move wires around a 1/4 inch and can make a huge difference cumulatively. When I've done that to every stage in an amp, even on a little Fender thing like this, you can get rid of all kinds of oscillation and thudding in a tremolo circuit where you used to hear thud, 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 just by moving wires a 1/4 inch away from each other.
Yeah, I played with that. You'll see that, we talked before, James, about
ask a simple question, get a 20-minute answer. Sorry.
We talked before about, even hot rodding a 2204 by changing the cathode setup of the second gain stage and how that can introduce oscillations and so on. So, that's a 3 gain stage plus cathode follower design. When you add another gain stage to an amp like that, you're in a world of pain unless you know how to kind of keep it under control. Because if you cascade hot gain stages like that, the amp will just go crazy. So one of the things that you do see, if you study like an SLO style circuit, that kind of thing, and
I was going to make the same point about Friedman's, but go ahead. Yeah,
then you'll often see that it's okay to actually have some like a chilled out gain stage, like, you know, Lyle mentioned before the 39K cathode in the SLO, right, which is a real kind of signature part of that design. You know, that has a kind of a sound about it because of the way that gain stage is biased, but it's also it's a pretty low gain stage. And so when you've got that many gain stages in the amp, you can kind of afford to play around a bit and not you don't have to maximize the gain out of every stage, because
you can also do tricks like Friedman does. I don't want to give out specifically what he's doing because that's his business, but you can do fairly large reduction in a voltage divider with fairly large resistors. So you're dropping a lot of signal, but you're having a lot, very little loading in the preceding stage. The preceding stage is operating kind of fiercely, but not all that signal is getting to the next. So you're just introducing certain characteristics from the audio into the audio, even though you're not really bringing up the level so much. Conversely, what he does with some of his switches is he has a relatively mild voltage divider, but with very small resistors. So he's not dropping as much signal, but he's loading down the preceding stage a lot, which means that while the signal hitting the next stage is louder, it's not going to be clipping as much because it was never amplified as much because the load changed. And again, go read Merlin, go read Aiken's books, because the explanation for what I just said is a 4-hour research project. And you see Dave do it, you see other people do it, you see it in the SLO. When you have multiple gain stages, you don't need to get all your gain in one place.
This is it.
They have to work well together towards a goal.
You have to kind of like, and you'll find that, I mean, it depends on this kind of sound that you're looking for, right? If you're looking for that kind of doom gludgy kind of sound, then maybe you'll be chasing something different. But my experience shows me that you got to keep the bass under control. If you're trying to like develop a preamp that's going to deliver a decent amount of gain, it's very easy. The bottom end gets out of control really quickly. So you'll see in a lot of the, you know, and Dave does this a lot too, right? You'll see in his stuff, kind of lean out the bass, and there's a few different ways you can do that.
Don't try to be the band.
Yeah, yeah, this is it. That's a whole different conversation, but yeah, it's a good point. Yeah, depth circuits and amps.
Well, yeah, I was watching you guys talk about that, and yeah, the typical depth resonant circuit, yeah, it does change the phase, because, like I said at the beginning, you know, when you have two signals and they're joined together after capacitor, that shifts the phase, and so where they cancel each other out, they cancel each other out with the phase relationship. So what Dave's describing there is it sounds different, even if you're not adding low end. It's because it sounds different, but that's all switchable. You can do it any way you want.
Yeah. Kent says, Jason, ever done or plan to do a 20 watt? Yes, I've done a bunch of 20 watt one-offs. But yeah, in terms of product release plans, do I want to have a low wattage amp in the lineup? Yes, 100%. That will happen. So stay tuned.
It's going to use 18 12AX7s just to be different from everyone else.
Was it the stream with Dave that you talked about that? The single-ended, the 100-watt single-ended amp or something like that with the transfer.
I didn't go to that extreme, but yeah, I mean, people say it's Class A and it's 30 watts. I'm like, no, it's not.
This is the
with
one.
A transformer the size of my fist and two EL34s. If it's Class A, that's a 12, 14 watt amp. It's not 30 watts. You can run single-ended tubes, output tubes in parallel, and you get a gain increase, a volume increase, but it's not. You know, so I think people will be shocked to understand how log scales work and how much power you have to increase to truly double the perceived level. There's so much marketing bullshit out there. I don't feel bad for musicians not understanding the stuff that the rest of us have to study electronics for. I feel bad because companies take advantage of a lack of common vocabulary.
It's true, man. It's been around forever, all that stuff, you know.
Is it a 15 watt? Is it an 18 watt? Is it 20 watt? Is it 22 watt? Yes. Yeah, sure. If I measure it at 1 kilohertz, it's 1 wattage. If I measure it 400 hertz, it's another wattage. If I measure it 2K, it's not as much watts.
This is true. Brad says, I don't often see, I think this is you're talking before about the twisted wires on the heaters. So I don't often see 3 wires going to a triode twisted. Merlin advises it's a good free way to help stabilize an amp with small capacitances it introduces. Any reason why it's not often done?
Yeah, it's an additional stage in production. It makes it easier for people to miswire it. And typically in a amp where you have wires, you can just dress those wires against the chassis and take advantage of that capacitance there, or you can just route the grid along with the plate and take advantage of that capacitance. You know, John Suhr, on some of his higher gain stuff, he'll have a grid trace on his PCB. On the other side of the PCB, he's got the plate trace. So that the plate and the grid are running like that with just a little material between them. What is that? What is that, Jace? It's a capacitor.
Yeah,
So it's built-in free shielding. So yeah, I think if you needed to do a really long run from a part of an amp to a triode, 3 wires twisted might be good. Also from electromechanical support point of view. But you know, I'm about to put a post-phase inverter master volume in those basemen, and one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to tightly twist the right and left grids from the output of the coupling caps, and then I'm going to wrap all that with the bias and bring all that across the whole thing to the pot used for the master volume, and that's going to be quieter than any shielded run. So it's kind of the same thing he's doing, though I'm also not just doing capacitance. I'm not actually doing much of any capacitance there except for the voltage thing, the bias, but I am doing common mode cancellation. Sorry, freeform amp geekery.
You should try
to do this, man. Isn't that crazy?
You should, yeah, you should try the new master volume post-phase inverter master that Dave's been talking about.
I did. Either I severely misunderstood about what he was describing. I don't think I did, or it's not always the magic bullet, depending on other factors in the amp. But as I don't know 100% that I was doing what he suggested, and he's not here to tell me I'm an idiot, I won't say that he's wrong. My findings did not bear that out in the amplifiers I was trying it in.
Interesting.
If he sees this and he calls me, he's free to tell me I'm an idiot in person. And maybe I just misunderstood him.
I've tried it once, and it was in a mid-70s non-master volume JMP.
Mm-hmm.
And look, it worked, and it worked. I couldn't say it was arguably better than the traditional post-phase inverter, because I didn't actually, you know, like what we were saying before with coupling caps, right? I didn't implement both circuits and then A/B it or whatever. Right. I just did it. I went, oh yeah, it works. Sounds good. You know, whether it's better, I don't know.
I'll talk to you after this, make sure I was doing it right. But I'm never in a hurry to say Dave's wrong or I disagree with him. So it's very possible that I misinterpreted what he was saying, because I never want to take up too much of his time. He was in the middle of some other stuff. And he gave me kind of a thumbnail version of it, but you know, maybe he was saying it's going to be French vanilla, and I just wanted vanilla bean. So
we'll chat after. Yeah. Hey, Shay.
Thanks, Shay.
Tuning in, man. Shay, yeah, I think that was your. We were talking about adding the gain stage to a 2204 when that comment came in.
Again, before we go forward, I don't mean to interrupt. It's okay if you just end up using overdrive pedals with it. You know, if you look at the Jose mods and stuff with the clipping diodes, that's exactly the same thing most pedals do. It's just doing it at a different part of the signal path. You can do the diode clipping and additional gain up front, or you can do it before or after the tone stack. Doesn't have to be in the amp. You can see if you like it before you make any mods.
It's true, man. So James, yeah, adding the gain stage, SIR 36, yeah. So
SIR is
tricky. Yeah, all the stuff we've talked about right? You need to, and it's different in different amps, right? We've all had this experience, I'm sure, where you implement the same circuit into a different donor amp, and one oscillates and one doesn't.
Man, there's so many things. Like I've seen a guy, he built a bunch of amps, and he built a train wreck copy. I don't remember which model is Express, and it was squealing on him, oscillating. And he put some pictures. He sent me some pictures of it, and I said, "Well, here's the thing. Look at the pictures of what Ken actually built versus what you built." He said they're exactly the same. I said, "No, they're not. You see where Ken had little bits of silicone holding those grid wires right against the chassis, right at the tubes, and you see where Ken had that like window foam insulation across that big part of the chassis, just to keep the chassis dampened. Everything matters.
Yeah.
Go back and put the silicone, the same amount, in the same places that Ken did. Go to the hardware store, get some 3/4 inch by 1 inch window foam insulation, eyeball what Ken did, put that same amount dampening the same bare part of the chassis. Try all those things, because you have a circuit that has so much gain that anything that's happening physically, acoustically in the environment will affect it. And if everything's vibrating, I won't do my amp oscillation impression. I can do it perfectly, but I'd embarrass the rest of you who aren't capable.
That was mate, hard to imagine you could do that better, actually. Yeah. So yeah, the layout in those train wrecks is everything. Yeah, that was the absolute secret. Ken says, where can or will we be able to buy your stuff in the US right now? Right. I think earlier in the stream, Ken, I said that 5 out of 6 amps that I build and sell are to the US. So I'm working with, you go back to there, my good buddy and business partner, Shay, who's in Indiana. And through Shay, I'm distributing directly into the US, right? So it's not, you won't find my stuff in a store over in the US, not yet. It's not at Sweetwater or anything like that. We just sell direct. But yeah, man, we're actively supplying into the US as we speak. I'm shipping an amp to the US tomorrow, actually. This one's going to Maryland, which is right on the East Coast, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. Well, yeah, Rob, the new post phase inverter, it's not the kind of cancellation one.
It's not in the train wreck pages now.
Not the train wreck one. No. It's just a variation on the, the kind of the Lamar style one where you're playing with the bias splitting resistors, basically.
I don't want to go too far into it here. A, because I'm not sure I got it right. B, if it's Dave's thing, that's Dave's thing to give out or not. So
yeah, I'm only kind of talking about it, I guess, because when Dave was on the stream about a month ago, he described it. If you go back to my first or second of these Q&As, maybe number 1, number 2, because Dave was on 4 weeks in a row, which was just so bloody awesome. He
only did mine once.
He described it all completely impromptu. It was like none of it. The only one was planned. That was last week's one with Shay. The rest of them, he's just like, yeah, come on. Cool. All right, man. I think we're at the end of the chat. Finally,
well, this has been fun, man. I appreciate it.
This has been awesome, man. We did 3 hours, which is amazing. And thank you for coming on, man. That's just awesome.
Look, I always enjoy talking about this crap. No one in my daily life wants to. I've always enjoyed talking to you, Jace, and I'm glad to see some of my usual suspects have followed me over here. So, you guys like, subscribe, check out Jace's other videos. He gets to play in the high gain pool more often than I do. So before I go, I'm going to pee in it.
And on that note, that awesome note, we'll sign off. Thanks for tuning in, guys. We've had most of the time more than 100 online, which is for my little channel is awesome, and I appreciate it.
It's a Wednesday
Thanks,
night
Lyle.
party or Tuesday afternoon party. Sorry.
Yeah, hang on the line, man. I'll
Sure.
just end this stream.